May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer, and it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Amen. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi. ¿Cómo está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi. Ça va? Ni hao. Namaste. Wasaya aliketuya. Mahayo. Kamsa. Kamsamida. Manut. Habari gani? Ako Abba. Ente Jambo Mebini Kofi, Nina Farako Katana Nwewe, Bakwatav, Barakalat Sham Yahava, Shalom, and Kofi, head of the Servants of Christ, Mashalom Hey. Hello, everybody. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servants of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voices and speaking the unspoken. We got a little weird setup for you guys, I know. Trying to make sure. Last time everybody was saying they couldn't see it from the angle, so I tried to start off from the angle that you guys said you could see from. So hopefully you'll be able to see the board from all angles. Facebook is going to be a little weird angle because you won't be able to see my entire, or you won't be able to see my face at all. But hopefully you can all see the board. And we appreciate you for being on. Let me go ahead and make sure that it's married for TikTok. We appreciate everybody for being on. And we thank you. We appreciate your presence. Thanks for being on with us. I am Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant to Christ. As I said earlier, we're always changing lives one mind at a time by being the voice of the voices and speaking the unspoken. We once again give all praise and honor to the Most High, Yahweh Elohim. We give all praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that's able to be honored. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. And we're thankful and grateful for everybody on this rising, grand rising to you, top of the rising to you. May your day be filled with peace, with shalom. To the moderators, administrators at the SOC, we appreciate you very much. To the moderators, as always, I bow down and thank you guys for what you do. And I appreciate your presence today in helping us on this journey. If this is your first time with us, this is part of a series called The System is Sus. And we were telling everybody all of yesterday, please be prepared if you can, because what we would like to do today is do some Q&A from time to time. You know, we get in these series and we get going. And if I'm not careful, even though we try to answer as many questions as possible, sometimes we can't obviously get to all of them. And depending on the context, we can't get to all of them. So I would like today to be about Q&A. So if you have certain questions, certain comments, things like that you'd like to bring up, we ask for you guys to see if you have them prepared for the day so we can jump right in. And hopefully I'll be able to do my best to help you out with those. Let's say hello to everybody before we get started. If you're on Facebook today, I'm not really going to be able to see you, because the only way that I can make sure you see what we see is if the screen is facing away from you, the way Facebook sets up their live. So I think I saw Sister Crystal on there. And if I miss your name for a little bit, please forgive me. Minister Shantae, how you doing? Stephen Smith, hello. How you doing, Brother Jermaine? Uh-oh. Let's see. How's everybody doing? Romac. If I miss your name, charge to my head, not to my heart, by the way. How you doing? Talks with Toya. Hello. How you doing, Romac? How are you doing? Happy for you. And by the way, we also said if you want to try and chime in, if you would like to be able, if you're on TikTok, that's the only platform I can really open it up to that we're using right now. But it's still backwards. Or it must be from earlier, right? How you doing? Happy for you. How you doing? Talila, Sister Monica, Flight Countess, Woman Star, Sister Beverly, Spike Me Too, Michaela. Michaela. Is it Michaela or Michaela? Not sure. How you doing? Oh wow, thank you for that, Michaela. How you doing, Marky, Darius? Big Brother Thomas, Black Steel, Chanel, thanks for being part of the community. Everybody who's coming on, Sister Latoya, everybody, Marley, King, Dinosaur, probably, not sure. How you doing? Everybody, we appreciate you so very much. So today is once again Q&A. So let's dive in, hopefully it's part of the series. There's some things you've heard us talking about, and this system is sus. standing for the system as suspects, standing for certain things as far as law versus legal, or talking about how we're kind of messed up in our relationships, or talking about how we don't necessarily have a culture that we can subscribe to, or therefore have certain things we can prescribe from our own script, right? Not knowing what actually is being spoken in certain canon or certain laws that are set before us, people reversing the mindset that we should have as humanity, whatever the case might be. So any questions, comments, concerns, and on TikTok, we will do our best. We do have multiple platforms on, by the way, everybody who's on the podcast, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. We appreciate your presence, right? Any questions, comments, concerns? Any questions that we can start off with? This is Q&A for today. So let's dig in, right? I always say this, everybody says it all the time, you know, these pastors, you know, these leaders, you know, these Afrocentric brothers, you know, all the patriarchy, they just tell you what to do. They don't let you ask any questions. They don't answer your questions. I get so many people on here who the moderators have to deal with. You know, I get so many people on here that, hey, they just cut you off. They don't let you ask any questions. Okay, today's the day you can ask questions. Now, we do have a couple rules. The moderators, I bow down to them. I let them do their thing. We do have a couple rules. I got to be honest, right? Number one, please, ma'am, please, sir, we ask that you respect people. If you come on here and you're just making fun of people, whether it be me or somebody else, or you're just asking questions for the sake of questioning and not actually questioning for the sake of actually trying to learn or listen, you might be dealt with, right? Yeah, if you are somebody who's up here saying certain curse words or things, or even saying certain phrases, those things can get us in trouble with TikTok. And also we have people of different ages that watch this. So we ask that you guys be careful about that, right? But if you are genuinely asking a question, feel free to ask whatever question you would like to ask. And thank you for the love. Appreciate it. How you doing, Sister Tracy? Any questions? Because I'll say, let's go into Q&A. You can call in if you're on TikTok or whatever we would call it, chime in, call in. I don't know what you would say, right? But you can go ahead if you'd like to call in, if you want to request, right? You can go ahead and do that if you like, right? Or you can just, whatever you like to do. Now's your chance. Okay. Okay, here we go. And hello to everybody. I'm sorry I missed y'all coming on YouTube. How you doing, Sister Joy? Sister Joy said if a person has a mental illness issue and they know that they have mental illness issues and you try to help them while being nice, caring, and friendly, but they don't want it, do you just let them be? Well, it depends, right? That's a very open-ended question. And I'm not saying that's bad, by the way. I'm just saying it's open-ended question. So I'm going to go a few different ways. Well, if you're able to, I think on TikTok you have to have, if you wanted to join in or whatever, I think you have to have 1,000 followers or whatever they call it. So I do apologize. You might just have to put it in the chat, right? If you don't have that, or if you don't meet that criteria. Sometimes it actually, for some reason, will let people in that don't have it. But I think the rule of thumb is that you have to have that many, right? How you doing, Sister Nadine? So if somebody's dealing with mental health issues, right, I want to direct you to a very familiar passage of scripture, right? Or for some, maybe not so familiar. Romans chapter 15, verse 1. Romans chapter 15, verse 1. Now, we must comprehend this comes after the Roman road, something that we like to call the Roman road. So when I say the Roman road, right, if I'm talking about the Roman road is basically getting what gets us all the way through Romans chapter 1 up to this point, right? The way that we put it, the way that we, you know, there's many people, I'm not the first person to come up with something called the Roman road, right? I'm definitely not the first person to come up with something called the Roman road. How you doing, Sister Nadine? Right? But the Roman road, when I learned it, it was basically at one point 2 verses, then 3 verses. The verses were basically Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of Allah. Then it was Romans chapter 5, verse 8. Where actually, then a lot of them just go straight to Romans 6:23, that the wages of sin of death is death, but the gift of Allah is eternal life. Eventually, I saw somebody put in the middle of there Romans 5:8. Romans 5:8 being Yahushua commended his love unto us, that while we were yet sinners, he died for us, right? But before I go through the Roman road, and it's going to be really quick, We have that on our YouTube channel, by the way, where we break down the Roman road, in completion. And every time we do it, we end up adding more, right? But Romans chapter 15, verse 1 tells us that those of us that are strong, those of you who are strong, you should take on the infirmities of the weak. Now, this word infirmities is very peculiar, interesting, and thought-provoking. Because this word, when they say the infirmities, a lot of us go to a place where we just talk about mental. We're thinking just mentally, right? We're thinking of infirmities as far as going to an infirmary, or going to a hospital. But this word infirmities is actually talking about, in context, the mental health issues of the weak, or even the spiritual, the pneumatical issues of the weak. Even you might say the psychological issues of the weak, right? So when it says here, Romans 15:1, let those of you who are strong, it is not your strength, right? The context is what? That you are strong in what Yehashkai, or what Yehovah, or what Ruach HaKodesh has been able to sow into you. In your culture, you have some things that make you strong, and there might be some things that people are going through that are tearing down their mental health, right? So if you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with things that tear down their mental health, how you doing, Sister Tori? And I'm going to try. We got several platforms on at the same time, so we welcome everybody on all platforms: podcast, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and eventually the other TikTok channel, or one of our other TikTok channels, will be joining us. But in order for us to have this correct, right? In order for us to have proper comprehension of this, we got. And I'm sorry, I said that. Long story short, just to let you know, if I miss today's Q&A, if I miss your question initially or something like that, I will do my best to try and hit them, okay? But when we're talking about this, we're talking about those who have mental health issues, those who have mental scars. We would call them mental or emotional. What about psychological? By the way, what does the word psychology mean? And we're going to do that, right? If somebody says psychology, how would I write out the word psychology? Or I'm sorry, what does the word psychology mean, rather? Right? Do you know what psychology means? We've talked about it plenty before on here. What if I say psychology? What does psychology mean? Right? Because people talk about psychological evaluation, somebody's not psychologically correct, but we don't know what these terms mean. We just hear them, and then people get to change them because they themselves didn't really know what that meant in its origin. So psychology, we think of it as being mental, and in a sense, we could say it's mental, but psychology actually means something different. It's a Greek term. Somebody says matters of the brain, kind of, sort of, but it's a Greek term. You might be surprised that in the Greek, if I were going to write out this word, and I would spell it exactly the same way that we spell it, if I were to write out this word in the Greek, when I write this word out in the Greek, what I'm actually writing out is, in the Hebrew, we would say it like this as well, just to give you a heads up if you didn't know. If you want to do some study or research. Some people would argue, depending on the character, I would actually argue this might be an E sound, but people seem to agree more on that, so I'll leave it like that, which means that it would be a whole other character, right? If you know the Hebrew characters, that would be nun, he, vav, shin. I believe it to be nun, hit, vav, shin. But nevertheless, right, that's the Hebrew term. But what we're really saying when we say psyche is this. In the Greek, the word psyche, or psyche, they would say, but in the Greek, the word psyche is the soul. So if I'm dealing with somebody's psychology, I have to know what the word ology is. This is why etymology is always so great to go through, right? If I'm dealing with the word ology or logia, then I'm talking about the logic of or the study of. So if I'm dealing with psychology, it is the study of the soul. If I'm dealing with a psychologist, see, this is why etymology is important. The IST on anything means you're proficient at it. In music, if I'm a tubist, that means I'm proficient at playing the tube. If I'm a flautist, that means I'm proficient at playing the flute. If I'm a pianist, I am proficient at playing the piano. Well, if you were a psychologist, right, then that would mean what? That I am proficient at studying the soul. So you must be careful when you go to a psychologist, because the person who is a psychologist, they study your soul. or you're nachivash. How you doing, Brother Anthony? Right. So we have to figure this out, because when Romans 15:1, because the question was asked, the first question, once again, today's Q&A, so I'll try to catch as many of them as possible. Right now I'm in the middle of this first one, but I will do my best to try and catch them. I can't really catalog them with our setup today, but I will do my best to catch them. So if I miss your question, or if you have a question and you see me walking around and I'm not answering it, I'm gonna try to do as quick as I can, answer one question, bounce to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, if we can. All right. Okay. So if I'm dealing with psychology, I must realize I'm dealing with the study of the soul. So when Romans 15:1 says, let those of us who are strong take on the infirmities or the mental health issues or the psychological issues of the weak, we're talking about those of us who have a strong connection to the Most High, those of us who are in his ways and have his psychology, have his soul ties tied to him, our spirit tied to him, and through the soul, we're able to keep the flesh in subjection, right? When we see people with issues like that, we should take on their infirmity. Now, this does not mean be a doormat. This does not mean allow people to treat you any kind of way, because you are always in teaching mode. Come on, Yashua. Come on, believers. Come on, humanity, right? Just in your humanity. You said I'm wrong. Okay, cool. Well, you go ahead and you tell me. You go ahead and you take that up and you do your studies. All right. But if that's your way of saying hello, how are you doing? Right. I can tell when somebody's not even willing to say hello. We already have an issue. Right. Your psychology is already off. All right. So here we're trying to be at peace. If you come in with war, right, you could easily say I don't agree. Versus like you're totally wrong. You could easily say hello. What makes you come across that, or where did you get that from? Right. But you go and look it up. When you go and you're right, go look up, right? I'm not talking about what people have changed these words into. I'm talking about the original. I'm talking about the origin, okay? I'm talking about the origin of these words, right? So let's make that clear. I'm talking about cultural accuracy. Not what you want, not what I want, right? Cultural accuracy. How you doing, Sister Deja? And everybody coming on. How you doing, Minister Samantha, right? Mark Woodson, Randolph, Soul Hearers, everybody, come on. Right. So we're talking about the psychology is the study of the soul. Matter of fact, for those of you who believe in your Bible, we always say this: read your Bible, it'll bless you. Use a strong concordance. That's what a lot of people like to set as a standard. Okay, if that's your standard, then go ahead and read in your strong concordance when it starts talking about the soul. When you see the soul mentioned, and then do some research, right? Research, look up the word, and you will see Psyche. It is pronounced Psyche. Matter of fact, click on it if you're able to have the option to click on it on your app or whatever you're using, and it will see that it sounds off as Psyche, and that means the soul. Okay? So Psyche is the soul, right? So if we're dealing with somebody's soul, we're dealing with somebody's psychology. So a lot of times when we're dealing with mental health issues, we're not talking about the soul. Right? Right. When we're talking about, and thank you for that, Danella, and how you doing? Right. When we're talking about somebody's psychology, somebody's mental health. Now, right, we're always talking about the soul. We don't want to deal in this, because in modern terms, when we have people that are trying to get away from what words meant in their origin, then we will not admit to the fact that these things were written for a reason. We don't want to get into proper interpretation. We don't want to admit that these words actually meant this before somebody else said, I'm going to change it to benefit my belief structure, right? And a lot of people, when they say science, we automatically hear science. And a lot of people who are in science, there's a narcissistic tendency that's starting to occur, to where scientists are now an escape route for a lot of narcissists, or at least narcissistic behavior. What do I mean by that? A lot of people in science, they're like, this is what I believe, this is what it is. And so they're making they're using improper experimental rhetoric. They're not even using proper experimental setups to ensure that we can actually get proper stuff. And they're going in there with their conclusion already, rather than going in with a hypothesis. Right? What is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is basically, if we could just make it real simple, right? A thesis. And it says what? Hypo. What does hypo mean? If I were to say you are hyperglycemic, I'm saying you are high level, right? If I say you are hypoglycemic, I'm saying you are low level. So when Yahushua tells the religious leaders, he says, you are a hypocrite or a hypocrite. He's saying that you live underneath the criteria. You critique others, but you live underneath your own critique. You are a hypocrite. You are hypocritical, right? So hypercrite would mean you live above the standard. But if you're a hypocrite, you live beneath your own criteria, right? So a lot of people who live underneath their own criteria or really don't even have a criteria, they just, now science has become, for a lot of people, I'm going to disprove what was proven, even if it's what somebody else believes or even what I learned from believes. I'm just trying to disprove everything. But that's not what science is supposed to be for, right? Science is supposed to be about quantitative and qualitative data. It's supposed to be about controls. It's supposed to be about making sure that we don't change things. By the way, even if you find out that something might be true once, you're supposed to have multiple results of it, because let's say you have 20 experiments, but you only prove one time what you're saying, that it means that it could be an anomaly. You have to prove it. You can't prove it 1 out of 19 times, and by scientific proper scientific thought process, say that means that it's true, right? You can't come up upon something one time and say because you did it once, it means that it happens every time. That is proper science. And thank y'all for the love, appreciate it. So when I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with a lot of people who are trying to go by this narcissistic tendency to be able to say that I'm going to change psyche to whatever I wanted to believe it, rather than actually recognize it as what it meant from the very beginning. Because somebody will come on and tell me, I've had this happen before. Well, you know what? Things change. Words change over time. This is their belief system, things evolve. I believe that one of the worst things that's happened is that we've gotten away from the original. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities. Look up that word. You'll see that it means we wrestle against origins. A principle is supposed to keep the origin, keep the original in place. That's what a principal is supposed to do in a school. If you start doing other things that are not the origin, that are not written originally, the principal is supposed to be the one that says, teacher, get better, student, get better, assistant principal, get better. They're supposed to set a standard, but not just a standard. They're supposed to make sure there is an original standard. See, this is why words are important. So when somebody says, how do I deal with somebody with a mental health issue? First and foremost, I've got to realize if I'm dealing with anything psychological, I've got to be somebody who's studying the soul. I've studied my own soul. This is something that we really got to get in place, right? Because we're so busy telling everybody about their soul and talking about the beam, the chaff in their eye, but we never talk about the beam in our own. So first and foremost, make sure your soul is straight and make sure your soul is strong. And make sure your spiritual and physical connection to your soul is strong. Why? So that then when you deal with somebody, you can be proficient at the study of your own soul so that you might be able to help somebody out with their psychology or their soul. Did you catch it? Right? This is why words are extremely important. Be proficient at the study of your own soul, right? Before you start talking about somebody else's soul. Because if your soul is in jeopardy, even if you have some great advice, your advice is still going to be lacking something. It's not going to be its most proficient if you are inefficient when it comes to your own deficiencies. Or at least correcting those deficiencies. So all that being said, getting back to the question, great question, by the way, Sister Joy, right? So all that being said, I missed you. Sorry, Sister Nadine. Thank you for saying that. Right? So all those things being said, if I'm going to deal with somebody's psyche or their soul, I must make sure that I realize if I'm dealing with their psychology, I've got to talk about their soul. I've got to see if they've got soul ties. I've got to see what's happened to them. I've got to admit that maybe they could be better. I've got to see if somebody's done things to them that hurts. Yeah, but before I go in, so watch this. If I'm doing marital coaching, I'm asking questions about your past first. Why? Because a lot of your problems in your marriages have nothing to do with each other. A lot of them have to do with how you were raised. Right? You don't like the way he disciplines. She doesn't like the way you discipline. It's because you were disciplined differently. I've got to figure out what's going on with your soul tie. And is it relevant to what you're dealing with now? Right? Like my children have gotten spankings. My youngest, barely. And only when he was like little, and I realized when he was little, and he never really, well, he got like one strong spanking. He never really got an actual spanking for real like that, right? And I stopped because for real, he doesn't need it. He's words of affirmation like his father. So if I tell him that he's not doing something wrong, I have to be careful just telling him, because he'll start to cry and bawl and think that I'm telling him he's the worst person on the planet, because words really hit him. So I'm very protective of him, even when he goes to the playground and different things like that. I know words touch him different. So if I'm dealing with him, I can't, right? A spanking for some children, like I needed some because of how wayward I was, right? But he's somebody, he can't even really lie like that. He's been raised, and in a sense, and I'm glad, I'm proud of this. He's been sheltered from certain things. So even though he's aware of things, he's very intelligent, he's highly intelligent, he's able to come and tell you guys things and show his righteousness at a young age. So, and I appreciate that he's following his father's footsteps. But yeah, there are certain things that he's not, that's not part of his, that hasn't permeated his soul. So I can't treat him, how you doing, Miss Pierce? I cannot treat him like I would treat somebody else. I could, but would it work if it's not something for his soul? How you doing, beloved? Right? If it's not, you see what I'm saying? If it's not going to help his soul, if it's not going to help his soul, somebody else, you might need to go ahead and give him a little spanking. And I don't know if you need to abuse them with some of the stuff that we do, like switches and stuff, because they're not slaves, But somebody, so certain children, you might need to do that, right? I told you, for some of mine, I did, right? But for him, that's not something that is necessary for his particular psyche. So you have to first go in. And a lot of times what happens is we know somebody has a mental health issue, but we say, I'm going to love you past your mental health issues. But what does love mean? Now we got to go a little deeper, right? What does the word love mean? Right? I'm going to give you a working definition. But what is, simply put, what is love? If I'm going to love somebody, what is that? I love you. I love him. I'm so in love. Do you not realize that the sun, the moon, and the stars have brought us together in a love that cannot be calculated, right? It cannot be in any false sense of equivalency. People who have tried to make sure that they describe our love are people that are just simply denying the power of the universe, because the universe drew us together. And then 2 months later, you're broken apart. Very poetic. But what is love? Simply put, right? Somebody help me out. How you doing, Sister Snap? What is love? What is the simple definition of love? If we were just make it simple, before we even get into the working definition, let's stop making these things so mystical they're not practical. What is love? How do you love somebody with a mental health issue? Well, first, what is love? It's self-investment. Okay, you can invest love in oneself, but what is love? And I'm agreeing with, look, all these things agreeing with, I'm going to a particular place. I just want to let you guys know. Somebody says love is everything, non-separation with Elohim. I like that. Care, right? And by the way, in our culture, to care for somebody, if I say I care for my wife, it means that I meet her needs or think about her needs and her wants even before she might think that she needs them. See, culture is everything, because you'll say, I care for you. Well, in my culture, if you care for somebody, you think about their needs and their wants even before they might think about them, right? This is why I made a point to say, I'm being culturally relevant. This might not be relevant in the culture that you decide to reside in or decide to be a part of, right? I might be in the system, I'm not of it. So I'm just letting that be known, right? So the bond between two people that have deep affection. Okay. Watch this. When I say I love you, in my culture, love is an action. You guys say that too, right? I believe. So for me, love is an action. Love is an action, right? Hate is inaction. Y'all be talking about haters, but haters, by the definition, by proper definition, the word hate really means to detest something. Somebody tests you with a certain action, and if you hate it, you will devalue it or you will deconstruct it so that test is something that doesn't pop up in your life so you can ignore it. So haters actually do things to detract to the point to where you'll be ignored, right? Which is why you got to learn how to live with your haters and appreciate them, because if y'all still blessing you, even though people are trying to destroy you, then you should actually appreciate haters. That's why if somebody comes on and they try to depreciate what I'm doing, I say, I appreciate you because you're appreciating me in value. So if you're going to depreciate me, but you look crazy doing so because you don't even know what I'm talking about, then you're just making me look better in value. I appreciate your hate. Right? See how these words work? But see, love is an action. But our working definition for love, I'm not going to write it out. We just wrote this out not too long ago, actually. I'm not going to write it out again today, but I'll say it 5 times for you in case you want to record it. I don't know if you can screen record or if you want to go ahead and try to write it down. I'll say it somewhat slow the first couple of times, right? But then, or if you want to try to memorize it, I'll say it 5 times for you. You ready? What is love? Working definition here at SOC. Right? SOC University, SOC organization, SOC members, etc. What is love for us? Love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. It is also a description so powerful that it brings about manifestation. Sorry, I didn't say that one slow. I'll slow it down these next 2 times. What is love? Working definition here. What is love? Love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. It is also a description so powerful that it brings about manifestation. What is love again? We're going to say it slow. This is the 3rd time we're saying it. I'm going to say it slow again. Love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. It is also a description so powerful that it brings about manifestation. By the way, speaking of love, I don't know if I said this earlier, but in love, please keep lifted up our very own Minister Joseph and Minister Sharon. That's all I'll say right now, because I wasn't given authority to share it with everybody. But just I ask that you keep them in prayer. Mom. Okay. So love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. It is also a description so powerful that it brings about manifestation. One more again, love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. It is also a description so powerful that it brings about manifestation. Why is that important for us to make sure that we catch? Because love, the action, right? Love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. If you show actions towards somebody, people begin to describe you by what you show. How you doing, Trigger? Thanks for being part of the community, right? If you show certain actions, people will begin to describe you as your actions. She's so caring. He's so awesome. They're always taking care of the community. Their food tastes so great. When I eat their food, I feel the love. Like they'll start to describe you as what you exhibit. And a lot of people say, why do people describe me as this or that or whatever? You got to start asking yourself, what are your actions? I'm not saying your actions are even wrong, but sometimes you don't know how to speak to people. So you'll do something nice, but you speak to everybody like trash. So then they start to trash you. You say, why is that? Because your actions, even though you're giving them to people, they're not in proper love. So people will describe you as what you are. Now, look, I'm not saying look for the one description out of, if you get 100 descriptions and one description says you're trash, I'm not saying that, right? Nor am I saying you should necessarily say because the majority. You got to see who values you, what community you're part of, and what it is that you think is valuable to hold on to. But love is an action so powerful that it brings about description. It is also a description so powerful that it brings about manifestation. Right? So once people begin to describe you as something, once something's spoken over your life so much, words have power. You will become what's spoken. This is why you got to be careful, not only about how you want people to speak over you, but who you allow to speak over you. Now, this is not what I'm saying, or I'm not saying that everybody who speaks, you have to check everybody, this and that, or you can tell everybody what they get to and not to say about you. No, what I'm saying is who's in your circle? Who's in your sphere of influence? Whose sphere of influence are you in? And are you okay with being in that person's sphere of influence? Right? Some of us are okay with being called God. Some of us aren't. What's your sphere of influence? Some people say, what's up, my N-word? Some people say, what's up, King? Now, if you say, what's up, my Niger or my Niger or my Negus or my Negus, that's different. But you say, what's up, my N-word, that's different. And you don't recognize that every word counts. Some of you want to be romantic. See, this is psychology. Some of you want to be romantic. Psychology is always tied to your culture as well. Don't forget that. So some of you want to be tied to certain things that you shouldn't be tied to. You think that romance is great. You don't realize romantic means it's Roman antics. This is something that Rome does. You know? So you go, oh, it's so great that I have a candlelit dinner. That's because in Rome, Roman people, a lot of them couldn't afford places and candles were hard to come by for poor folk. And there were more poor folk than there were the elite. And so what do? Right? If you're able to get a candle, you really living nice because you can see what you eat. You guys will darken food on purpose, trying to be like having a poor Roman mindset rather than trying to make sure that you eat in light. We'll darken ourselves rather than be enlightened. Salah. You see? So it's difficult because a lot of people are speaking things over themselves. They don't even know what's going on. Right? Don't even realize what's going on. Some of you are in relationships have never asked somebody, hey, when I speak this word, what does it mean to you? Right? I use this as an example all the time. My wife doesn't really like the word okay. Why? Because of where she came from. The word okay is usually somebody being like, okay, right? Stuff like that. So even though where I am in my life, okay just means I'll do it. I agree. And maybe I do it sucking my teeth sometimes, but it's like, I'm saying, even if I go, okay, like I'm saying, I don't really want to do it, but I will do it for you, right? But that's not what that means. So guess what? Around her, I have to do what? Because of the psychology and respect of it and the love that I have for her, the actions that I give that will describe who I am to her, that therefore will have her see certain things that are manifest or even have certain behaviors manifest in her towards me. That's what I did. I erased it from my lexicon, at least when I'm around her. How you doing, Sister Marcia? Right? Why? Because that's love. And she's my wife. And because she's my wife and her and I are one, there's certain things that she gets to go ahead and get, especially on that level that nobody else should. Now, I try to give that same energy to everybody as much as I can, but she is besides the Most High, of course, she is my confidant of confidants. Right? She is my confidant of confidants. Right. So if I'm dealing, long story short, and then let's get to the next question because I've been on this for a while. I apologize. That's a great question. So that's why I told you it's a broad question. So if I'm going to deal with somebody who's having psychological issues, I have to love them and I have to love them where they are. So before you jump in to help anybody, right? Before you jump in, I don't care if it's your family. Before you jump in to help anybody, you should see where they are in their soul, their psychology. And what they're dealing with as far as their nature, what they're dealing with as far as their soul ties, right? And once we've dealt with that, then we can begin to actually develop a plan, a vision, which is big because a lot of us help people without a vision of what we're going to do. Hey, can you make sure that I get $50? Do you put a vision in place? Do you say, okay, well, why is this person always asking for money? Can I help them to be able to develop a plan? So where I'll give them the 50, but I'll give them the 50 and say, hey, you can't come to me again unless we're going to develop a plan on how to use your money. Because you make more than I do, yet somehow you're always asking me for stuff, right? Like that's a vision plan. So if they have a psychological issue with not being, that leads them to not manage things well, then we have to say, okay, let's deal with that. I'll help you, but let's have a vision plan, right? So that was a great question. Great question. All right. Any other questions? Let's go. I can stay on that all day. I can see that could be a whole thing within itself. Psychology is outstanding. It's incredible. Psychological evaluations, once you realize that psyche is the soul, you'd be surprised where you can go with that. Today's Q&A though, any other questions? That's what I said yesterday. I say this all the time, really, always have your questions ready, but that's what I said yesterday. It's interesting when we get to the Q&A, we always have people that question everything. If we get to the Q&A, nobody's got questions. There was actually one that popped up twice yesterday evening. I can't remember what it was. What was yesterday evening? Somebody said it in two different places, not the same person. Two people actually asked it in two different platforms at the same time. Hermetic text, what about hermetic text? I'm sorry. Yeah, that one's extremely broad. And some of it I may or may not be able to go down that road. So you have to tell me exactly what you want. Like, are you talking about whose culture? Are you talking about from whose perspective? Are we talking about more stuff that has influenced Mesopotamian? Are we talking about stuff that's influenced as far as modern Hebrew? Are we talking about the actual Avada or the ancient Hebrew? Are we talking about interpretation through the lens of the people who actually were there? That one's a tough one for me to just answer. And I might not be able to answer part of it depending on what you're actually talking about. The language, okay, once again, what? Right? It's like if somebody says, can you tell me about English? Okay, we're talking about Anglo. Are we talking about Anglo-ish? Are we talking about 40% of it being French? Are we talking about it being influenced by natives? Natives of Australia, natives of the United States of America? Are we talking about the difference between what people might call proper English in English? Are we talking about the fact that the Bible wasn't put in English until King Henry the VIII did so as a middle finger to the Pope when he made himself the Pope of Protestantism, at least English Protestantism? I mean, like, you see what I'm saying? Because every language comes with a body. That's why they call languages tongues, because a tongue is attached to a body. You cannot have a conversation with language about actually what we're talking about. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's really broad. I just might not be able to answer that one. I just might not be able to answer that one, to be honest with you. That's what I was saying. Like, when we say hermetic, like, because also too, then I have to argue about what is actually hermetic, and people don't like that argument either. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I have all the tools to be able to really fully give you it in a broken down state the way I would really want to in this fashion. But I don't know. Let me sit on that one. Maybe we can come back to that. Somebody said the rapture. Right? So I guess maybe if you can put it this way for me, what do you think? What do you, when you say hermetic text, what do you mean? That'll help me. Maybe if you can say it like that, because I got to go through interpretation. So I got to see what lens of interpretation we're using. So what do you mean? Like, when you say hermetic text, what does it mean to you? And then maybe I can kind of ponder that for a minute and come up with something that'll help me actually. I'm very linear in my thought process, by the way. It's not even you, it's my thought process. I'm very linear. So in order to answer a question, I always have to like go back some and then like think boom, 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 boom to get there. So because hermetic sometimes can even just mean like, are we talking about hermeneutics even? Like, are we talking about hermeneutics? Some people just mean, are you talking about the breakdown of words? Are you talking about the actual like culture, right? You said Al is him. Well, El is something different than Al. In Alpha or Hebrew, in Paleo Hebrew, it would be Elohim, not Elohim. Elohim, El actually comes from something else where people have twisted some stuff over time, which is something that they started using even with the Druids. It's a mismanagement of or an appropriation of somebody's culture, right? But Al can actually mean like by his side. Al also can mean depending. So we're doing something where we're going into somebody else's language too. Like El can be he in a sense, but if you're talking about the actual Avda or the people who wrote it, they wouldn't have used Al the same way, but they would have used it to be somebody connected to the Most High, right? But Al is not even I am. I am is a word where you're dealing with Hayach, or some people will argue a Hayach, and that's why they try to say the name of Yah as a Hayach, even though the next verse after Exodus 3:14, Exodus 3:15 tells you that his name to us forevermore is his monument unto him is Yahweh Elohim, and anybody who says they follow him should call him such. You see what I'm saying? So it's interpretation is very key. Anyways, though, what was the question? Let me get to the rapture. Rapture, right? So really, the word rapture is not too difficult to deal with. Overall, will the sky crack open? Yes. Right? Will the choir be rolled back like a scroll? Yes. Will people be judged? Yes. But the key, the part that we have that we're missing is that rapture, the reason why people argue over the rapture is, once again, it's due to interpretation. That's what it was. Can somebody? Oh, no. It was, can somebody be taught love? That's what it was. Two people asked it in different places. Is it possible for an adult man to be transformed? That's what it was. So I'll get to that. That was from last night. How you doing? How you guys doing, Ange? Everybody coming on, user 1766. So rapture is actually not that hard to deal with. Why there's so much miscommunication or arguments about it? Because the word that's used is not an original word, right? You know, we don't have a word in Hebrew for rapture, right? Or we don't use the term rapture. So rapture is speaking of the accelerated rate or the quickness that we're going to see all these things happen. That Revelation chapter, once we get to Revelation chapter 4, once we hit Revelation 5:1 through 2, first horseman, 5:1, or Revelation 5, 3 through 4, second horseman, Revelation 5 through 6, third horseman, Revelation 5, 7 through 8, fourth horseman, Revelation 5, 6, 9. I'm sorry, Revelation chapter 5, verse 9. Wait a minute, I might be in the wrong thing. Revelation chapter 6. Excuse me, hold on. Yeah, Revelation chapter 6, Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, or 1 through 8 are the four horsemen. Revelation chapter 6, verse 9 is when we get to Revelation chapter 4 is when you see heaven. Revelation chapter 5 is when we get to the Lamb. There we go. Revelation chapter 6 is when you start to see all the stuff happening. So Revelation chapter 6, verse 9 is when you start seeing those who are asking for vengeance, and Yahweh is telling them, hey, just hold on a second, just wait, it's coming. And then after that, you see at the end of Revelation chapter 6, you see all the stuff that the choir is rolled back like a scroll, what some of you call the firmament still, but the choir is rolled back like a scroll, and wormwood is going to be tossed out there, and a third of the waters, and this and that, and everybody's running. And then Revelation chapter 7, right, is when you get to Yashval has to be sealed, the 12 tribes, and then everybody else who's grafted in can come on in, of all nations, tongues, etc. Right? And Revelation chapter 12 talks about Israel needing to be separated. Revelation chapter 13, going to a point of then even talking about how the beast, the government, has been created to look just like Yehoshua, and Yehoshua himself now is going through a place of is warning us about making sure that we're not into the Antichrist spirit, all those things. Then you get to this place where people talk about rapture, and that comes from something Paul talks about. But with Paul, or Paul, some people would say Pavan, talks about, he never used this term rapture. When it was rewritten, this term rapture was put. It's a Latin term, right? That actually would be rapturo, right? Rapturo, right? Now, rapturo also, we would say like this. Raptor, right? Now, many of you think of raptor because we don't use other languages that often, or we don't realize how much we use other languages. A lot of you, when you think of raptor, especially because of movies, you think of these dinosaurs that were actually that didn't exist. But they actually took, raptors were supposed to be these really small dinosaurs that were, I wouldn't say like the size of, well, maybe even dog size, cat size, something like that. Maybe not quite as small as what we think of as cats, but maybe like some of the dogs that you have about their size as far as their height. and they supposedly went around in packs and all that stuff. We don't know because we weren't there, but that's what supposedly scientific evidence tells us. So we think of the characters we saw in Jurassic Park that they created, we think of those as raptors, but a raptor is just a bird. But nowadays, after they made the movie, especially, they started trying to tell, they started really trying to pick up steam and trying to tell you that dinosaurs are just birds, and now they have feathers. And even though there's no way of being able to tell if something had feathers after it died, believe it or not, especially when the bones get to be a certain age, you can't really tell. They're just giving you guesses. They don't know, right? But then when we call it science, right? But scientific theory, I'll give you, but it's not science, right? But anyways, but a raptor is a bird. Now, the fastest animal on the planet, the fastest animal on the planet is a raptor, a bird, right? The fastest animal on the planet is a bird, not the fastest animal on land. That's a cheetah still, I believe, right? Not the fastest animal in the water. I can't remember which one. Is it the swordfish, right? Something like that. But the fastest animal in the world is an animal that flies, a bird, right? And it's a specific type of raptor that goes 200 and something miles per hour straight down, right? They even have some that you can look at on YouTube that Mongolians train to help them with hunting, right? But a raptor is the fastest thing on the planet, and it goes 200 and something miles per hour. Now it doesn't have the strength, right? In talons to be able to really fight something. So what it does is it goes as high as it can, right? And then as high as it can, way up to where you can't see it a lot of times. You can't even see it, but it can see you. And it starts to come down, and it comes down to where all of a sudden it hits an animal and usually goes for its spine. Comes down and hits its back. It can take out prey way bigger than it. Right? And so when it hits the back, connects with it, right, it breaks the spine. Once the spine is broken, you can't do anything. You're done. Right? So when they talk about the rapture or raptor or raptor, what really they're trying to get across in Latin, because that's what we're really dealing with, this is a Latin word. So when it was translated to Latin, what they're trying to tell you is that the rapture is going to come with a speed that you're not prepared for. So don't prepare once you see the rapture or once you see the raptor, right? If you see the raptor or the rapture, it's too late, is what they're saying. It's coming. It's going to hit you. It's too late, right? If you go like this, and you get hit, it's too late, right? Thank you, Peregrine. Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Peregrine Falcon. Thank you so much. I couldn't remember the name of it. That's what they're talking about, the Peregrine Falcon, right? A raptor, they go so fast that it can't be seen. This is why, as somebody put in the comment section earlier, this is why it says it comes like a thief in the night, right? So if you want to prepare yourself for a thief, you don't wait until a lot of y'all, what happens is a thief comes to the door and somebody says, go check it. Will you check it? Will you check? Mm-mm. If a thief tries to come up in this place that I'm in right now, I got something for him. You know what I'm saying? I'm prepared, right? Everybody in my family even knows where it is. My youngest is prepared and he's gone through safety training, but he's not going to be the one to do it. I got it. It's a place to where if anybody tries to come in, I got a couple of them things, for real. But if anybody tries to come in this place, right? I'm prepared in advance. I'm not waiting, right? Like it doesn't make sense to go and get something to prepare yourself, right? So when they come, hopefully maybe you got a bat laying around or you got a stick laying around. No, it's too late, right? You got to be prepared in advance. Don't talk about you, right? It's too late, right? It's our pleasure. Thank y'all for being on. So when it talks about the rapture, it's not talking about. A lot of people do this thing. Oh, well, somebody was in their clothes and they're gone. That's movie stuff. I'm not saying that it may or may not happen that way, but we don't get that described to us. What we get described is basically it's coming fast. So don't talk about all of a sudden, right? Your enemy is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. This talks about he's trying to hunt you. What is a raptor trying to do? They're trying to hunt prey. So this thing is coming, and you who are going to be prey to the devil, right? That's how he looks at you. He's looking, right? He's been, why are you here, right? In the book of Job, well, I've been just walking to and fro, seeking whom I may devour. There's coming a time to where all this stuff that you've been learning is going to be put to the test. We're going to find out who you really are. And so it's going to happen with speed. So don't be sitting up there and doing your thing and say, well, tomorrow, well, I got 5 more minutes, right? Well, you know what? I would do it, but they can just wait. I would forgive them, or forgive it until you forgive the way you want to be forgiven. You know what? I'll stop condemning condemn the way you want to be condemned. You judging people's salvation, judge the way you want to be judged. Why? Because give, and it shall be given unto thee. Elohim's measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give unto your bosom. For with the same measure that you meet, shall it be given unto thee. It's Elohim's measure. And when he comes, he's going to hold you to the standard that you say you supposedly live to. So be careful. So what this in Latin is really trying to get people to recognize is the speed in which it's going to happen. You don't have time, right, to start looking after the attack. If anything, be prepared to protect yourself from the raptor that could come on you at all times. Yes, no one knows the day nor the hour except the Father, right? So this is what it's talking about. So when somebody says rapture, that's basically why there's a lot of argument. So now with that, armed with that, you should be able to, when you do research and study, when you hear people talk about the rapture, realize that when they're arguing a lot of stuff, you're going to find that they're arguing a lot of stuff that has to do with mismanagement of words. Great question. So can somebody be taught love or how to love? So back to love, right? Just real quick. I know we kind of already went over love. But just to answer that part of it. So what is love? When we talk about love, can somebody be taught to love? Once again, what is love? Simply put, love is an action. So you teach people actions all the time. Now, if you're saying can somebody be taught a specific type of love, well, now we're talking about a specific type of culture. Right? So my son is being taught how to love his wife according to our culture. Right? Now, can somebody be taught that? For sure. Is it best to teach them when they're young? Yes. Is it best to make sure that you're with somebody who has been taught that before you get married to them? Yes. Is it best to make sure you do that before you all have children? Yes. However, if you're in a position where that's not the case, and you guys are both trying to be transformed, right? Not be conformed, right, to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, the renewing of your pneumatical thought. The pneuma is literally a word that means the stoic thought that marries the soul, the spirit, and body together. This will affect what? Your psychology, your psyche, meaning what in Greek? The soul, which will allow people to have their flesh in subjection. So yes, I can teach somebody how to love. It's best to teach somebody or inform somebody when they're young and to have an environment. See, the problem is that we got a lot of people who say brothers can't love correctly. And I'll agree with you to a certain extent. Problem is what is the environment that you're going to raise them in? Is there an environment like this, not just virtually, but even physically, where we can get together and talk? What is it that you're going through, brother? What is it that you're going through, sister? Right? Are we trying to create that, or are we just doing the same thing everybody wants us to do? Y'all ain't this, y'all ain't that. Because if that's all we're going to do, then that's love too. We're loving that too. That's an action. We're putting energy towards that if we're not careful. Right? So yes, anybody can be taught proper action. Now at a certain point, especially when you get to a certain age. And look, there are brothers out here who are 40, 50, 60, 70 who have came up to me and said, hey, Pastor Kofi, thank you so much for what you teach as far as love and the culture and stuff like that. It's helped my marriage. So I've talked to grandparents who've gotten their relationships together. It is possible. I've seen it. And we praise God for it. It is marvelous in our eyes, what he does. And especially when we live by his culture, by kingdom culture, and stop depending on culture vultures, right? Who wait for you to die off so they can feed upon it, to get energy out of it, like energy vampires. That's what you would call them, right? That's what they teach us to call them and nowadays. But yeah, so love. Yeah, love is an action. So I can teach action. Matter of fact, that's something that we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that we teach our brothers and sisters, our spiritual sons and spiritual daughters, our Israelite brethren, our fellow family members, even our elders that we respect and love. We're trying to teach people the culture of love according to this culture. Now, somebody else, they love certain things, like certain cultures, they love money. That's why pretty much all divorces have to do with people not making money. Because in certain cultures, that's what you desire. Right? So there are people that put love of money before love of wife, love of husband, love of self. Some people don't love themselves enough to say there's certain things I won't do for money. Right? You see? So we have to have proper cultural conversations. So that's why I always say, look, this is cultural. This may not be for everybody. This is not to make sure everybody agrees with it. I know that not everybody is living by this, or learning by this, or growing by this. And there are some people that will hear me say this, and this will sound completely foreign, because if you don't live this, it might not be something for you. Right? But now the next question, is it possible for an adult man to be transformed into a husband? Like we just said, the renewing of his mind. Right? When you see the word mind does not necessarily mean spirit. When you see the word mind is usually, at least the way we usually, or the prism we usually look through, is we're dealing with the pneuma. Pneumatical thought. Pneuma, originally, I know people are going to try to change this to something now, but even in this modern definition, you have to admit that pneuma, or pneumatical thought, is dealing with stoic thought that marries the soul, the spirit, the psychology or the soul, and the body together. So can you transform? Yes. But once again, what does it say? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present yourselves a living sacrifice, holy, whole, one, and acceptable, which is your reasonable service. Right? Right? So are you able to reason? Right? Think about what the words Paul is saying. I beseech you, therefore. Therefore is because of all the stuff that comes before the Romans. I beseech you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies, right? Got to be merciful. And you must be merciful with them, because if you're not, you keep them in a box anyways, even if they get better. Right? That you present, right, by the mercies of Elohim. It's not your mercies, it's his. That you present yourselves, so you're accountable for how you present yourself. Present yourselves what? I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present yourselves a what? Living sacrifice. So I'm all the way, it sounds like an oxymoron. It sounds like cognitive dissonance, because I'm saying be alive. I'm saying I need you to be alive, but I also need you to be dead. Seems weird, right? A living sacrifice. How can I be alive and dead simultaneously? And if you're not careful, what you're doing in your mind is you're trying to say this. You're thinking this. Because we're not thinking pneumatically. We're not being mindful. We're not taking the soul, the spirit, and the body into account as one. This is total transformation, right? There's not alive equals to be dead, or dead equals to be alive. He's saying that actually it's even, and this might be confusing to some of you. This might make it more confusing, but I'll do my best to explain it. This is actually a mathematical equation. That you present yourself a living sacrifice. A living sacrifice. It'll make you have to become holy and able to accept certain things, acceptable, which is your reasonable service. In order to serve, you must be able to reason. And be ye not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. I need to become so great at being alive in things that are of the culture and dead to things that are not, that I become transformed. Does that make sense? Sounds weird, right? But see, transformed, it means that he's going to have to live a different thing, right? Is it somebody check me out? Am I right? Is it John 10:10? Can somebody turn to John 10:10 and fact check me real quick? I believe it's John 10:10 that says the devil, the enemy, he comes but to steal, kill, and destroy. Yahshua says, I have come that you might have life and more abundantly. Right? Now, this doesn't make sense on his face. Right? This doesn't make sense on his face because on his face, John 10:10, if that's what it is, somebody please fact check me. I don't want to give you all wrong information. John 10:10, it doesn't necessarily make sense. Because you say, well, I'm alive already. Why would I need life? That's correct. Thank you, Sister Sage. Appreciate you. Right? It doesn't make sense. If I'm already alive, why do I need somebody to come and give me life? If the enemy's come to steal, to kill, and destroy, and I'm using that educational purposes only, I'm using that word, quoting it, right? To steal, to kill, and destroy, right? If he's coming to do that, then that should say that I already have life. So why do I need to have life if I already have life? Why have you come that I might have life? Because you could be going through motions and still be dead. See, a lot of people are dead already. You are already dead. Some of you are zombies. You wake up every day. You know, you don't say rains. This is what you say. You wake up and you go, work, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and you walk around all day like that. That's what you do. You do the same thing over and over again. You don't go towards a vision, right? You're not making yourself better. You're not making sure you're saving money. You're living paycheck to paycheck. Even if you're paying tithes, nobody teaching you principles as far as you can give 10% to the Most High, you can give 10% to yourself. Right? Because he's a king of kings. So if you as royalty are under the royalty, and the royalty says 10% should be put aside, then you should be putting 10% aside and start trying to figure out what to do with the 80. Bare minimum. Right? But you're doing stuff that's spiritually dead. You're dealing with stuff that's spiritually dead, death. Life and death is in the power of the tongue, and those that love it will eat the fruit thereof. You can have life and death in the same tongue. By the way, we only think about this in negative and positive. Have you ever thought about that life and death can go together? Come on, Proverbs 18:22, wife. Have you ever thought about that you can kill certain things out of your family just by speaking over them? And at the same time, you can make things live over your family just by speaking over them? And I'm not, once again, just saying negative only. Right? Because you can be a wife and you can say, hey, I don't like that over my husband. So I'm not going to speak to make my husband feel bad. I'm going to speak death to that spirit and make sure that he's covered in that. Meanwhile, I like what that is. I'm going to speak life over that spirit. Death and life, same tongue, same body. We automatically assume that it must be talking about negative words, positive words. What if you need to speak positively in a manner that denies access to something in your life? I forget the name of the experiment. You guys know about the experiment that the guy did in, I want to say it's in Japan. I could be wrong. Please forgive me. I'm not trying to be racist. I just can't remember the person. I feel like it's Japan. I could be wrong. I could be doing the Asian thing. All of them look alike. I apologize. I honestly believe, I think it's a Japanese guy. I could be wrong. He did an experiment. And he had all these basically petri dishes. And he took the petri dishes and he spoke over them. It's called the water experiment. Okay, thank you so much. Right? And he spoke over them. And that's Brother Vincent, I believe. I think it was. Right? Was it? Yeah, thank you. Right? So he spoke over them. He didn't even speak over them, excuse me. There's somebody who did one where he spoke over. Let me get this correct. He actually put water in and he wrote certain words on the different petri dishes, if we want to call them that. Right? And he put them over the water. So he put the water in these places. They were open up to the air and stuff anyway, so they're going to get a little bit of stuff that we all get. And water or food or anything is going to have some stuff if it sits long enough that starts to grow inside. But when he wrote the words that were negative, and they checked it out over time, those words that were negative grew all type of really gnarly and disgusting and decrepit and ugly different things inside. right? But then when he spoke things that were positive, when he wrote things that were positive, right? When he wrote the things that were positive, what happened? He wrote that those things turned into really great and awesome and beautiful, transformative, really, we would consider them pieces of art. Right? Now, this is water. Yeah, we're made out of water, but I just want you to catch something. This is water. And writing death and life meant that the water had to obey. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's several, so we might not be talking about the same experiment because there's several experiments that people have done this with water and with petri dishes as far as putting bacteria in, and with people doing stuff with their plants and stuff like that. But the one I was looking at might have been, I think it was written. Maybe it was a combination of both, right? Because I know there's one that somebody verbally spoke the words as well, right? Either way, right? Death and life and the power of the tongue, the language, the connection point. Right? The connection point. This is the connection point. Right? Death. So there's things that you got to start living in, and there's certain things that you have to simultaneously start allowing to die off of you so that you might be able to be transformed. Transformed means that I'm living a new life that allows, but if I have a new life, certain things must die. You see? And by the way, here's something that I want to give you too. Words are pretty much as you don't want to hear this, words are pretty much one of the most powerful things to exist. People will try to deny words and that they don't matter what you say and stuff, but you don't believe in the universe if there's not a word. I just want to put that out there. Y'all know that, right? Like the word universe means what? What is universe? Verse simply means a, or we really should say one. That's what a universe is. It's a single spoken sentence. How you doing, Gregory? How you doing, Minister Moselle? So if you want to get in touch with the universe, you got to figure out who spoke the sentence. There is no you without a universe. There is no you. This is what it is. For us, that's Barashat bara alacham at shamayam at arat. So in beginning, alacham created what? Heaven and earth. Towards heaven and towards earth is a better translation, but created heaven and earth. Right? Now what you're dealing with is a lot of you are trying to figure out how to live in a multiverse because you live by so many different versions of creation, or so many different versions of an explosion, or so many different versions of evolution. Right? But we don't want to get in touch with the one who had to speak it. Somebody had to speak it. This is why I said we got to go back to the origin of it. Right? This is why we got to get away from the origin of it, right? Or we got to get back to the origin. We've gone so far away from the origin of things. Right? Romans chapter 10, verse 1. It's still my prayer that Yashta would be saved. Romans 10:2, right? We have a zeal for Elohim. It is not according to knowledge. Romans chapter 10, verse 3, we started getting into everybody else's culture except ours. That's the issue. Right? In your culture, it's explained pretty simply. Why is it that you keep giving up who you are? And it's not his will that any would perish, but all would have everlasting life. Why is it that you keep talking about humanity, but you keep looking for everything else except the one who spoke humanity into existence? You cannot even be a human being unless you are a humus man, dark, rich, nutrient earth, with a spirit inside, which means everybody came out of the same humus man. Why do you keep looking for advice on who you are from everybody except even him? Even though he has sinned and messed up, he told you what was up. Seth told you what was up. Enoch told you what was up. Methuselah told you what was up. Naah, or who you call Noah, told you what was up. Sham, or who you call Shem, told you what was up. Avada, or who you call Hebrew, told you what was up. Like, we're talking about somebody who goes back. Even the Avada language, the Hebrew language, proper Hebrew language, the Paleo Hebrew language, is a language that, if you do your research, goes back to Adam or Adam. Which means that whatever Adam spoke, if you learn proper culture and go back to the origins of language, then you should be able to speak the same language that Adam did to the Holy Spirit. Why? Because when it says in your Bible, they be lying to you. In your Bible, when it says he walked in the cool of the day, right, or with the Holy Spirit in the cool of the day, that translates actually to literally he walked with the Holy Spirit. But because they don't want you to have access to this, and they want you to be thinking about the wind and preaching about how cold it is versus how refreshing the cool breeze is in the heat, not realizing that he was in paradise. It felt great where he was. He was melanated. It felt great where he was, right? He didn't need the cool of the day to make him feel great. He didn't wait for the cool of the day to show up and walk with it. No, that doesn't even make sense, right? Go look up that word. It is the word lavak, or what you like to call luach, right? It means that he walked with the Holy Spirit. This is why we got to get back to this. You people are trying to talk about universal law. You can't talk about universal law if you don't talk about the one who created the universe. Amen. Anyways, let's keep on. But yeah, see, so this is how you transform. Male and female, but you asked about men. You got to transform them through that. Uh-oh. How you doing, Julie? Thanks for being on. I apologize. I know I'm missing some of this stuff. I apologize. I'm walking around a lot today and trying to write on the board, but thank y'all for being on today. And especially on Facebook. I know you can't really see me like that, but hopefully you can see the board. Is there a way to determine where we are from if our grandparents do not know? Well, they're somewhat blood, but you can't really do DNA tests. Don't really work the way that you think that they do. They tell us enough about stuff. Some blood work tells us certain things, but you can't always tell exactly where those people are. I would always research, but I would say this. There are apps that you can pay for. I have to think about it. I have to ask my wife. We have one that we paid. We paid a lot of money for the app, actually. It's expensive, but it gave us like details on where our family was, who owned the land, this and that, or whatever. But you would be surprised what you can find. At this point, I can't get deep into that. I probably have to know your personal story for more information on that. And so we could probably talk, offline, so to speak. I would say that in order to do that, don't worry about the DNA test as much. Start focusing on, like, you'd be surprised even some of the stuff that gives hints. You'll have people that are talking, and now we're embarrassed about it because people told us that we were ashamed of our African culture. But you used to have people that would say stuff like, oh yeah, like we're Cherokee, we're Choctaw. And people say, oh, you're just trying to say that you're not black. Why aren't you happy with being black? Well, everybody that's black is not necessarily from Africa, and a lot of Africans mix with natives, right? Seminoles, Choctaw, what you call Cherokee or Atakitawaya. And by the way, some of them were mixed with Africans before they came over. If you know about, I'm about to mispronounce his name, Abu Bakr, or the one, the brother who was king of Mali before we get to Mansa Musa. They went on a trip. There's evidence. It's written. It's documented that they went on a trip to the West. And the brother couldn't keep up with them and had to come back. And then eventually they would go on a trip and they would find their brethren in South America. That's West Africa, South America. And when we're talking Mansa Musa, we're talking we're talking closer to us than the time of Christ. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of evidence and stuff like that we are already spread out all over the place. If you look up Hebrew tablets that are found in Cherokee lands or over the Bering Strait. And if you put that together with 2nd Esther chapter 13, verses 40 through 45. So there's different ways to kind of start really determining stuff, and a lot more truths that we should dig into, because we kind of deny certain things where we don't really know which way to go. And so sometimes it's easier to be African American. But remember, we weren't African American until 1980. So, some of the stuff it takes a deep dive. It's not as easy to get, but I personally think you should stay away from some of the DNA stuff. First of all, they're just collecting, and secondly, a lot of the places where everybody's been giving their DNA to, they're now having to admit, because they're getting sued, that you can't really tell, where you come from. It's more of an exercise. That's what they're trying to label it now. To this gathering of Israel from the four corners of the earth by angels and the coming down of the new Yerushalayim happened simultaneously. If you can, Minister Samia LeRae, if you can tell me exactly which scripture you're talking about, because if we're talking about Revelation chapter 7, right, and we're talking about that, then we're not talking about instantaneous, because then if you put it together, obviously with like Revelation 12 and some other stuff, and even Revelation 10 and stuff is in between there, as well as the eating of the scroll and stuff that has to happen, even though you could say that's more John's path in his dream, more so than what's happening in time. But it tells us in Revelation 12 that after Christ, right, Revelation 12 is actually dealing with Christ until, and dealing with us being in the wicked system that we're in now and what's going on. Like if you read the beginning of Revelation 12, it literally says that Israel, the woman with 12 crowns, is talked about prophetically in Genesis chapter 3 and Isaiah chapter 9, and Jeremiah chapter 3, etc. That this woman with 12 crowns, Israel, is travailing, she's getting ready to give birth. And just like it's presented to us in Genesis 3, and you had in Genesis 3, you had the, I got to start remembering to, I'm sorry, y'all. I got to start remembering to make sure that I put this on airplane mode, so they stop hitting us with these calls. My bad. I just lost TikTok. But yeah, so to answer it further, answer it better. What were we saying? Oh, Revelation 12. So you have the woman travailing and going through all these pains and stuff, and the serpent is waiting, right, to be able to try and get at her. The serpent is waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Now they're trying not to let him back on. TikTok is funny. They're just trying to make sure that people can't get on now. They're just trying to make sure people can get. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. TikTok is trying its best not to let y'all back on. I did have a phone call, but I should be able to go on airplane mode so I don't receive phone calls. But now they won't let me go on airplane mode. It's interesting. Anyways, not TikTok, but anyways, I'm gonna leave it alone. Y'all think I'm a conspiracy theorist. But long story short, so Israel is once Israel, gives birth to Hashvi then ends up going back up, right, into the heavens. The devil tries to follow him. He fights against what people call the archangel, and the archangels beat the brakes off of the devil and his imps. They shoot down into the heaven. I'm sorry, from the heavens down into the earth. Right. So, by the way, the devil is not, according to our culture and according to your Bible, you will not find that the devil is in hell right now. The devil is roaming to and fro. He's on the earth. And as he's on the earth, it says that Israel, right, this woman, she has left. She has separated herself, and she's in the wilderness. Why is she in the wilderness? Because whenever you go in the wilderness, you're preparing yourself for what Yah has for you, right? Just like when we were in the wilderness for 40 years, we went into the land of Canaan, just like Yahshua went into the wilderness 40 days, at least before he was tempted. And then after that, he was able to be helped by the angels, and then use his times and half the time, or it's 3.5 years, to be able to bless us and ultimately be a sacrifice, right? So just like that, this woman, Israel, is supposed to make sure she's separated and goes into the wilderness, that she's not part of their civilization. She is building up her own civilization and being prepared for her husband to return, that they might be able to go into this land of Canaan, where a new heaven and a new earth will meet up together. Right? And they will be unified and married together as one in the spirit. So when we're talking about that, that's not, and it also says in Revelation 12 as well, that there will be a remnant. So we always say we're the remnant or this and that, but it says besides Israel who has separated herself, there will be a remnant. So you must recognize that there are Israelites who are coming together and who are going to come together and be together. And those of us who are together will be this woman who has gone into the wilderness to separate herself. But there's a remnant of us that are still out there that we need to set up bridges to, that they might be able to come out of the world. They might be able to hear this and come out. And those who want to even be grabbed in can come out, right? So that's not necessarily simultaneous, right? Destruction, when you see the four angels, remember Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, I believe is what you're talking about. I could be wrong. But Revelation chapter 7, verses 1 through 3 is speaking on Revelation chapter 7, verse 1 through 3 is speaking on destruction supposed to come. The four angels are holding back the winds. And just as they're getting ready to release them, here comes the fifth angel. Hey, hold up. Before that happens, Israel must be sealed. And then it mentions the 12 tribes, right? So this people must separate. And even, and then the remnant, which is not only Israel. A lot of people want to hear that, but once again, it's also those grafted in. Romans chapter 11. Revelation chapter 7 tells you that once Israel is sealed, separated, there'll be a place for those who want to be grafted into what we're rooted in, can be grafted into the tree, right? Because it's not his will that any would perish. It didn't say it's not his will that any Israelite would perish. It is not his will that any would perish, but that all would have everlasting life, right? So that's something that's going to happen over time. If I comprehend the question correctly, I think I do. Amen. Great question. Great question. All right. Let me see if I missed any questions. Great questions, by the way. If you have questions, comments, and concerns, today is the day. I mean, every day is the day technically, but today is the day. Let them flow. Let them roll off the tongue. Is this great? Is anybody getting any word today? Anybody liking this format? You said put on do not disturb. Okay, I'll do it next time. I don't want to leave this again because every time I leave, they make it hard for me to come back on here. Yeah. Amen. How you doing, Melissa? So we are all forgiven if we keep that first in our hearts. This is such nourishment for us all. How you doing, user 1766? Any questions, comments, or concerns? Come on. Hallelujah. Give praise to God right there. See, and this is why we need more of this. I'm not saying we don't do Sunday schools and Bible studies and all that. I'm just saying we need more of this. We need more stuff where we can get back to culture. Somebody can ask a question. And look, I'm just asking you guys, if you have a tough question, you're not going to get blocked or muted for that, by the way, right? The moderators are not going to do that to you. We deal with people who are being not even necessarily agitated, people that are just obviously doing their best to do things that are not righteous or doing things to troll or whatever. But even if you have a tough question, let it be known. Now, obviously, some might be personal questions. You don't have to do all that. You said, why do I think that people are praying for the universe? Because once again, I don't think people comprehend what universe means, right? Remember? And you know this, but I'm just putting it out there again. Right? I don't think people know what it means. They think that, well, you know why? Now that you ask it, I never really thought about it on this level. But now that you ask it, Holy Spirit, thank you for the direction. Because this is really not my thought. The reason why is because people don't know that the universe is a single spoken sentence, right? So this comes from a belief system that's not, as much as we want to declare that it's our culture, it's not our culture. It's really not. It's really not our culture. But if I could just go, and I won't take too long. I saw the question about how does one breathe the Holy Spirit. We'll get into that as well, right? But it's really not our culture. But what's happening is a couple of different things that we have to be honest about. We are dealing with being Kemetic more than being Israel. And look, I'm somebody who carries Kemetic blood. Now, there are Kemetic people who came out with Yashar and are mixed into us, for certain, right? So don't say I'm trying to say it, but a lot of us just automatically look to Kemet or to Egypt, is what people call it nowadays, but Egypt and Kemet are two different things. But we look towards Kemet because we had no clue who we were. And what really happened with Kemet, right? If you comprehend, like a lot of people don't even care about other East African nations. They don't care about other North Africa, like they don't study Carthaginians. They talk about being a Moor, but they don't know anything about the history of Morocco. Nobody really studies the Put or the Libyans. Nobody even cares about the Canaanites and the people who actually originally lived in what you guys call the Middle East. Nobody studies Mesopotamians. Nobody really talks about, the Darfur. Nobody talks about the Shoman. Nobody talks about Queen Nzinga and the Angolan history. Nobody's talking about Mali. Nobody was talking about Timbuktu. Nobody, right? Matter of fact, Timbuktu were things that people thought were myths. Like I know growing up, a lot of us would hear about Timbuktu and never thought of any relevance to it or whatever. It was kind of like this mystical place or this kind of interesting word that you hear people just kind of throw out, but nobody knew anything about it. Nobody talks about the Zulu outside of Shaka. Nobody knows that the Zulu fought off the British, right? And did so well that the British to save face had to come and ultimately destroy through apartheid South Africa, right? Nobody talks about the Congo outside, and sometimes I would say outside of Lumumba, but a lot of people don't even know about Lumumba. I don't know the difference between him and PFO Lumumba, right? But I'm saying on it to say a lot of us, what's happened is we've taken what Kemetic people did and what some of the Nubians did, and we don't even know that the Nubians or the back then we would just call them Kush, that the Kush would have been the people who preceded Kemet. Like if you think of the relationship of England to the United States of America, that's the same relationship as Kush to Kemet. Kush came first. Same family, right? Kush, big brother, Kemet, second brother, right? Put was third brother, Canaan or Canaan, fourth brother, right? And so a lot of what's happened is a lot of us, because we usually use somebody else's lens to be able to determine who we are, right? We're so captivated by our captor. We're still dealing with Stockholm syndrome so much that what we do is we actually look at the things through their prism, right? Like we don't even talk about the Egypticals or the hieroglyphics. That's looking through things through a Greek prism. We want to bring up Cleopatra. Cleopatra would have been somebody who would have been considered to be a person of color, but Cleopatra was not African. Cleopatra was Greek. A lot of people don't know that, right? Nefertiti is somebody that we used to look at, and even the bust that we look at, a lot of people don't know that's a fake version of her because it was somebody who was of another diaspora who decided that he wanted to look like his wife, and because he thought his wife was beautiful, and he wanted to look like her, so he recreated it and made it extremely light-skinned to the point to where the bust originally looks like what you would call today, I don't believe in such terms as this, but what you would call today a white person. But we look at Kemet and we say, well, that's something that we identify as we had to come through Africa, and all we talk about is Kemet. And the reason we do that is because all we know about is what other people taught us. And they wanted to tell you for the longest time that people who were Egyptian, not Kemetic, but Egyptian, they had to be them. They had to be white. And to a certain extent, they were kind of sort of right. I don't believe in white people, and I don't mean I don't believe that you don't exist. I believe that the colonial construct, the social construct of their making somebody to be white, right? White is not a color originally. White used to mean bright. It used to mean see-through. It used to mean clear. It used to mean translucent. It used to mean something that was reflective when it came to color, but it was never considered to be a color. If you look at a snowflake, a white snowflake, if you study a white snowflake under a microscope, it is not white. It does not have color. It is clear. If you study a white blood cell, it does not have color. It is clear, right? If you study white polar bear fur, it does not have color. It is clear, right? I can keep going on and on. And since everything that exists has to have melanin, it cannot be white. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I mean, right? That when I'm saying that, not everything, excuse me, plants have chlorophyll, obviously, but I'm just saying every human and every animal has to have melanin or else they cannot live, right? Somebody who is albino, they're somebody who lacks melanin, and that is actually something that hurts them ultimately, right? Or makes life a little more difficult for them, makes even their focus difficult because the lack of melanin is causing them not be able to see. A lot of people don't know that, right? Like, think about it. Like, when you see albinos, there's actually a guy who's a comedian. It's Nathan something, pretty funny, right? He curses and stuff, but I'm just saying, he's funny. But when he tries to look in the screen, he's talked about this a lot because people try to make fun of him, and he cooks them up when they make fun of him. But his eyes do this because he can't focus, lack of melanin, right? But what we've done is that so what I'm saying is ultimately everybody to live, they had to be melanated. Even the albino, he has problems because he doesn't have as much melanin, but he still is alive because if the day he dies, or watch this, I only said the day he dies, that's not necessarily true. He could not have been born and he could not live if he was not melanated. Right now, he doesn't have extreme albinism, but he has what you would call blonde hair and this and that. He lacks melanin. The lack of melanin means that there's some nutrient deficiencies or things that happen, or even him being protected from the sun. He can't be in the sun the same way that you and I can, right? Why? Because when the sun hits him, a bunch of it goes straight through. With your melanin, you actually need to be in the sun, not just because you need to activate your melanin and your pineal gland and the what's the other place that I'm looking for? Not the hypothalamus, even though that helps it, but the pituitary gland that vibrates and stuff like that, right? But you need it because it takes a while for it to get through your melanin. It takes longer than it might take somebody else, right? So when he has those issues, the sun hits him faster, hits him harder, right? So which means that things that you might need 30 minutes to get, he might get them in 17 seconds. And so he doesn't experience the sun the same way that you do. It's not something that's helping him the way that it does, or it might hinder him because of the lack of stuff, right? So ultimately, getting back to this, I'm sorry I sidetracked some, but ultimately, certain people started trying to change what Kemet was into you thinking more Egyptian, even changing what Egypt was because they changed what Greece was, and they changed what Greece was because they tried to bring something that's there. So you're not living by your sentence, you're not living by your universe. What happens is a lot of people say, I want to be Kemetic. I just wanted to explain to you what I mean when I say I don't believe in the status of white or the white person, because none of us can be white, right? I know somebody would argue back, none of us could be black. Hey, that's an argument we got for another time. I'm just trying to make it a point to say I don't hate somebody because they're white, because in my mind, there's no such thing as a white person by definition. So all that being said, people go straight to Kemet looking through the prism of their oppressor. Your mindset of Kemet is the oppressor. The oppressor held Kemet up at a certain standard because Kemet did things that they still can't do to this day. They can't figure out. And then when they started saying Kemetic people look like you, they started saying Kemetic people had to come from aliens. And a lot of us still fall for the same record. If you look at it, and look, I'm not here to tell you I know exactly about the Anunnaki, but I'm here to tell you, isn't that interesting that you didn't ever talk about Anunnaki until people started admitting that you were Kemetic, or that you built pyramids in Illinois, or that you built pyramids at Machu Picchu, or that you built pyramids as Aztecs, or that you built pyramids in Nubia, or that you built pyramids in Mississippi, or that you built pyramids in Georgia. And until then, there was no Anunnaki. Now everybody's looking for aliens. They're trying to say now aliens had to teach, because there's no way these people could have done that themselves, right? Especially when you wiped out any libraries or anything that we had, or sometimes it wasn't even wiped out. I'm sorry, I sent an invite to somebody I didn't mean to. I was trying to scrape on the screen. Right? So ultimately, when I'm saying that, because the question was asked, why do people pray to the universe? What's happened is that we go back to this culture and we mismanage this culture ultimately, because we think that this culture prayed to the universe and that they believed that everybody was a neter. They didn't have gods, they had neters. And we say that they believed everybody was a neter. So now you translate it into your mindset. You say, well, everybody had gods. No, they didn't believe everybody was. And they knew that sometimes it was propaganda that these pharaohs were saying that they were neters so that everybody would bow down to them, right? And they were okay with it. A lot of them, some of them did believe that these were actual neters, sure, right? But it was something that they would become neters. You have this belief system that the 42 Confessions of Ma'at allowed everybody to become a pharaoh, everybody to become what the pharaoh did. No, the pharaoh might become a neter, right? The pharaoh could be the sun neter, or the sun god. He could be the embodiment. He could be the manifestation, but you couldn't. Right? And this is when we got to get into culture. Right? This is when we have to get into culture. right? We don't even want to admit. Yes, there's 42 confessions of Ma'at, right? Ma'at's supposed to be the nature of truth, and there's Noon, the nature that helps us to realize the positioning of the sun, and there's Ha, the nature, right? This who's dealing with stuff as far as the sky and everything, and there's tons of natures, right? But not everybody was going to become a nature, but they'll come up to you, they'll say, "What's up?" They should say, "What's up, nature?" But they really mean that's what they really mean, but they don't know better, so they'll say, "What's up, God?" But the only reason you call yourself God is because you think of false equivalency. It's just like the Buddhists, by the way, who says that everybody can be a Buddha, but Buddha didn't say that. They say everybody can chant to the same level of enlightenment, but you can't read the first, like let's just go with the Lotus Sutra. If you read the Lotus Sutra, the first chapter, chanting goes on with all these gods, deities, natures, etc. They just throw all these names in and say all of them were chanting, and none of them, and all this great manifestation happened. Then they said the Buddha began to chant, and he did stuff in the first few seconds that made everything that they looked like for chanting for a long time look like nothing. They don't even have that in their culture. That's not even their standard. You see what I'm saying? But you're taking their verse, their sentence out of context. Right. So in my culture, I believe we should do universe. So you have a lot of stuff going on where we worship this one thing because we had no reality of who we were. You had these people who were of a different culture, different ethnicity, whatever you want to call it, different race, if you want to use that term. And they wanted so bad to be Egyptian, and we started realizing there's no way they could be Egyptian. Nevertheless, even be Kemetic. And then, so what we said is we'll take that back. We're taking back our power, but that wasn't even something that Kemetic people believe in. And I'm telling you, somebody who's part Kemetic, okay? You hear what I'm saying? So you have to be careful. It's like when people talk about, I'm going to take back the N-word, and forgive me, trigger warning. This is for educational purposes only. I know we got babies watching. If you want to go ahead and have them step away for just a second, I'm about to use the N-word, but I want you to hear, right, what people are saying. Okay? So I'll give you 5 more seconds. I'm stalling. Better, but I'll give you more. I'm going to grab a drink of water. I'm out. Right, but that's why you got a whole bunch of people talking about, what's up, nigga? What's up, my nigga? All this stupid stuff. And they say, we took the power back, but you don't know that the word nigga came from the word nigger. And it came from the word nigger because we used to refer to ourselves as Niger, niggas, nigus. Right, but you're using a bastardized version of the word. That's not our verse. That's not our sentence, right? And you're trying to take power back from something when if you want your power back, just go back to the origin. First of all, are you Niger? Because not everybody's a Niger. Now, if you're saying, are you royalty? Sure, but that's not everybody's sentence. It's not everybody's verse. You see what I'm saying? So I can say, sure, by blood, I can say I have enough blood in me that maybe I can call myself Niger or Nigus. But it doesn't mean, right? But that might not even pertain to me. You got to know who you are. I know enough about my family tree to where I can even fill in some of the gaps, right? But that might not be everybody, right? You can be Kush. I believe Kush says nigus or niggas, one of the two, right? Right, where we're talking more East Africa. I know that some Central Africa can use it. There's some West Africa, especially Nigeria. Now they're using more Niger or Niger. And by the way, even when we do that, we do Nigeria. Nigeria is not everybody in Nigeria was a Niger or Niger. Somebody else, somebody's side piece actually suggested to the person who had a corporation who was over the area, they were the ones who named Nigeria, right? It's just like when we talk about Ghana. Kush, if you're talking about Kush, and I guess Nubia kind of sort of as well. If you're talking about Kush, you're talking about Eritrea, Ethiopia, South Sudan. You're also talking about how they even at one point, because we forget they were over Kemet as well, right? At first. And then they eventually at the end to fight off the Greeks who were coming in, they tried to defend it one more time and took over again. And they used to also extend, even like when we talk about Queen Sheba, there's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that her in part of the empire, she actually might have even made the capital, or at least lived in often, all the way over into what we call, the Middle East, right? So Kush is extensive, right? It's just like a lot of this stuff. You said where did albinoism come from? Albinoism, in all honesty, albinoism is if we want to talk about spiritually, now I'm talking about culture. This is within our culture, right? If we want to talk about spiritually, albinoism came from a place of sin. Sin means anything causing us to miss the mark, right? And death begins to happen because of sin. Death existed before sin. Death existed before the fruit was ate, however, right, or partaken of. So death existed, but the problem was not, but death had no power. Death is something that was created to separate us from sin, right? So once we sin, if you want to stay in a sinful place and be in hell for the rest of your life and deal with murder after murder after murder, watch your body atrophy and you can't get any better, like basically be a vampire that can never be killed, right? Y'all like vampire movies. And one of the things that happens in vampire movies is no matter how strong you think the vampire is, this and that, ultimately they always get to this place where they don't want to live anymore, right? And they just go somewhere and they waste away, or they stay in a coffin or something like that, and maybe something wakes them up. There's always this part, right? Because to live that long in sin, it does something to you. That's why even in the movie, what was it, Interview with the Vampire? Tom Cruise's character, Lestat, I forget what Brad Pitt's character was called, but Lestat basically does what he does to Brad Pitt because he needs somebody to, help him so he doesn't feel, dead, right? So he has a companion and somebody that can live forever with him because he's living by himself, but he's living in this sinful state, and it doesn't really help much. And Brad Pitt's character is basically supposed to be this tortured soul at the end. There's really no great outcome at the end, a positive outcome. It just shows you that he's the next tortured soul, right? And he can't really find love. And then he found this little girl, and the little girl, she lived to be a long time. And she was basically an adult, but she couldn't really be an adult because she was a little girl. Like, there's all this weird stuff that happens, but that's what happens with death, right? To be a vampire, you have to die, right? And so to be in sin, you have to die off. Like, something's going to have to die. But imagine that you're dying and dying and dying, but nothing can bring you back, right? So we have Yahshua HaMashiach's sacrifice to make sure that we are separated from this wicked body that is dying constantly, but is able to bring us back into connection now with a glorified body that we might live eternally, if that makes sense. Okay, but universe, one sentence. So why is it that people worship the universe or pray to the universe or think that God is a universe or say that the universe is in me and I'm in the universe because we're made of the same materials and all this different stuff that you hear? Well, simply put, once again, we're taking of a culture and we're trying to make it something that we want. There are people that want to be God. There are people that want to be the Most High. There are people that want to say that I have a right to do whatever. And by the way, you always do, but there's such thing called law. So everything that you do has consequences, and also there's things that need to be done to protect others from you, right? And the consequences that you might get on them. So a lot of people, they want to worship in that same way. They want to be worshiped. And a lot of us, because we didn't know who we were, hey, at least some of us are black. Some of us have woolly hair, that were pharaohs and stuff. And we know that these people look like us, and we saw the bus, and then we caught people red-handed spraying stuff on the walls to lighten the skin, so that some of the people who were Arabic, or even some of the people who are going over there who we would call white, are all of a sudden, we are all of a sudden able to catch them and say, see, that was us the whole time. And so now we say it's us, it's us, it's us. But some of that stuff is not for you, right? There has to be a certain point where we say the golden calf is not cool. When somebody comes to you and says, make for us a God, right? And you throw all your stuff and melt it down and make something in an image of something that you left that slavery. As much as I love to talk about things that are in Kemet because it helps us to comprehend certain things and fill in certain gaps, like slavery for my family was, Kemet for my family was slavery. You see? So as much as I will acknowledge Kemet and I'll acknowledge my Kemetic blood and things, I must also recognize I'm not trying to be in slavery. By the way, this happens for me as what you guys call Cherokee. Now we're really some people would even call us Taino. Some people even would say we're mixed with the Jamaican, because people don't know Jamaicans used to be up and down the east coast of North America and into the Caribbean. And then certain people said that, hey, you guys, we'll just call you guys Jamaican instead of giving respect to the whole tribe. But, or people who went by that tribal name rather. There's a lot of stuff that's out there. But even like with Cherokee, some of you call it Cherokee. Wouldn't even say Tisalagi or Anakitoya, but for those who believe in and know about the Cherokee, and my people, when you talk about us going across, and it wasn't just the Cherokee, it was the 5 favorite nations, so all of us went through this. But when we went through the Trail of Tears, a lot of people don't know that the Cherokee had sided with the Confederacy, and inside of the Confederacy, they also got slaves. So they had African slaves while being Cherokee, but they still wouldn't let them fight in the wars and stuff after a while because they figured they had too much, colored stuff up in them, and they might try to, rebel. So they forced them to walk the Trail of Tears eventually, right? And the United States did, rather. And when we got forced into Oklahoma, this is why you had that case that just happened recently, where the Oklahoma Territory had to be expanded for the natives again. That's because when we got over there, we were promised a certain amount of territory. And when we got over there, the certain amount of territory was when the certain amount of territory that we were supposed to have, it was, I'm sorry. Oh, it was basically when Lincoln won, he basically shrunk the territory and then to make sure that they had no power, he told the Cherokees and he told, all the 5 favorite nations, Cherokee, Seminoles, Choctaw, etc. He told them, hey, you got to get rid of your slaves. You got to free them. So, and this is written documentation of people who were former slaves talking about this. You can go read their accounts of it. And some of the natives, you can read their accounts of it. And there's museums that show it where you can read accounts of it. But they, where the Cherokee slaves walk in until the African slaves, I'm sorry, Cherokee walk in until the African slaves, you guys are free. And they don't know what they're talking about. They're like, free, what you mean? And some of them stayed on the Cherokee land. And eventually the Cherokees and the Africans began to marry into each other. And so even if you don't believe that some of us are just straight up native, there's a lot of stories similar to that have happened all around the United States of America, all around Canada, all around Mexico, right? You can't talk about John Horse. That's Seminole, of course, but you can't talk about John Horse and the story of Florida and even the story of Mexico without talking about, like, John Horse connects these things as tribes. So, we're spread out all over the place, right? So, but I have to be honest, just like I was talking about Kemet, I also have to be honest about my Cherokee side to where, when we do the Trail of Tears, it's sad for me on a couple different fronts because part of me was a slave owner in that experience, and part of me was a slave. Eventually, two becoming one. Forgiveness has to happen within my people for it to happen within myself. I have to forgive both, or not both, but I have to forgive the Cherokee in me that was a slave owner in order to make sure that I can respect the Cherokee in me that did righteousness before he was taught to enslave his fellow man. You see? So, right? The same way that I have to make peace with the Kemetic bloodline in me in order to make sure that I make peace with the Israelite bloodline in me, because Kemetic people came out of Israel with Israelites. Right? They sure did. Right? With Cushites as well, they sure did. And 40 years, they grew together in number. So at a certain point, right, I have to stop going off of somebody else's verse. I got to go off of one sentence, one verse. What's the original? And once I realize that, it's easier for me to start putting things into context and to start living correctly. So this is why when people get upset and frustrated, it's often weird for me, because in my culture, I have to do this all the time. I have to say, the Cherokee and the African, they mix together. Now both are considered to be Cherokee, right? Even though we know what happened. And that's okay. And the Cherokee part of me has to be acknowledged as far as the positive and the negative. It has to be. But then somebody gets mad when you say, hey, you might want to acknowledge that your forefathers did something wrong. Why do I have to acknowledge it? Because you're not going to be able to make peace with the situation if you don't. To ignore something that's causing you hurt doesn't mean that you're healed. It just means you are ignorant because you've chosen to be. Right? There's a scripture says this, right? What does the scripture say? My people perish for a lack of knowledge. And the whole scripture says it's not because you didn't know any better. It says because you have rejected knowledge. The word knowledge means to be intimate with. My people perish for lack of knowledge. You won't even acknowledge what's going on. So it's not because you didn't have your ignorance because you have rejected knowledge. And he says, since you have rejected knowledge, intimacy with this, intimacy with the situation, intimacy with me, intimacy with your intimacy with something that could cause you healing. He said, since you have rejected it, what is the law? What's the principle? I will also reject you, even your children and your children's children and your children's children's children to the third and fourth generations. It's deep. So now you got a bunch of people. Now what's happening? Now what are you starting to hear? We feel rejected. You guys won't let us in. Why can't I say this? Why can't I be part of this? Why do you guys say white people to this? Why people? You know why? Because you have rejected knowledge. And we're not saying, and we're not the ones doing it. You won't acknowledge. Watch this. There are tons of people that are part of SOC. There's tons of people that listen to me right now, and and people will call you white. And nobody cares about you being around. We are excited. I won't say nobody cares about you. We care for you. Nobody's upset about you being around. We're totally fine with it. You know why? Because there's things that you acknowledge. And since you acknowledge those things, come on in, hang out with us. Come to the event. We'd love to see you September 29th. We'd love to, if you need help financially, we got you. If your children need us to speak into their life, we speak into their lives. Right? Because you won't ignore certain things. And because you don't ignore generational curses, they can be broken off of you. And since we're trying to break our generational curses off too, let's come together. We have no problem with that. As we should not. But if somebody's going to ignore a problem and ignore something that's in the DNA or ignore something in DNA memory or ignore a curse or ignore a benefit, right? Like, this is why a lot of our sisters have a problem with this. You can't sit up here and say that as a man, you don't get certain things that women don't get. Just because you're not part of the patriarchal structure doesn't mean that you can't admit there is a patriarchal structure. Now, I'm talking about their culture. In my culture, our patriarchs hit different. They live different. They look different. They operate different. But just because you aren't part of the patriarchal structure doesn't mean that there's not a patriarchal structure, right? And those who will at least admit it, they get listened to. Now, some sisters don't listen. That's a whole different thing, right? But I'm not going to say every sister. There's a lot of sisters that will give, if you're honest about it, they're like, yeah, okay, thank you. Let's have a conversation. Thank you for acknowledging that I go through something you don't go through. And by the way, if there's brothers that say that there's some misandry out there, please acknowledge it. I bet you'll listen more. You're so busy telling them that women can't, like, it's so crazy. Women can't hate men. What are you talking about? Is it possible for a woman to hate a woman? Well, actually, now they put you in a position, so now you got to get really crazy. Well, technically, women can't hate women because hate is something that's fostered by the patriarchy. Stop. We're getting to a place where we can't even work together now because we can't live in truth. You said your men don't beat women like that? I don't even know the context of that. What do we say? I guess if you say black men don't beat women like that, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the context of it is, but okay. I'm not mad at it. I don't comment the context. Say, can we please speak on divorce and remarriage according to Mark chapter 10, verse 11 and 12? When divorcing his wife marries another, commits adultery against her if the spouse is still alive. Okay, well, so we have to talk about two words. Because we can go a bunch of different places. I'll read the chapter and the verses that you talked about. I'll go ahead and read those. But let's see. Mark. Chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. All right, so we'll go there. Also, too, we can go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 to 26. This is that set of verses is the one that the brother who got mad at me and kicked me out was live or whatever. He was mad about this particular. Well, this is more in depth, but he couldn't handle himself. I was talking about even when it was on the surface level. Shalom, sir. There you go. You all right? You okay? All right. Well, there's chairs if you need to sit down, or if you need to go back and lay down a little bit more. I know it was a little bit of a rough night last night. Or if you need to stretch or do some stuff. So we're saying Mark chapter 10, verses 11 through 12. When you have it, if you want to say amen, say I'm with you, I got it, etc. Trying to set up, trying to make sure we got the proper setup over here. Sorry, hold on 1 second. 1 second. Mark chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. Let's see something. Okay, I think I got it. Okay, I'm trying to make sure. We have an issue with the podcast, trying to make sure it was straight. Alrighty. Okay. All right, so we're at Mark. We'll go to Matthew as well, too. We'll go to Matthew chapter 5 right after this, but let's go to Mark chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. Praise God. And we're talking about with this. Amen. All right. And with this, we're talking about two different words, really, right? Three different words if we want to get technical. We're going to talk about three different words. I'm going to start off with the word that you're really dealing with more so than any of the other ones, right? Well, yeah, I'm going to start off with the one that you're dealing with. And now that I just did all that, I'm just talking to myself. I don't know what I did. Okay, here we go. And so when we're talking about this chapter, these verses, we're talking about three specific words, right? And I'll write those words in a second, but I also want to give you the next set of scripture if you want to get ready to go there as well with us. After this, we'll go over to another set of scriptures, Matthew chapter 5, and we'll read verses 21 through 26. Okay? That's where we're headed. All right? And then we'll write out the words that we're really dealing with out of these. Okay, so Mark chapter 10, verses 11 and 12, it says this. It says, and he saith unto them, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married to another, she committeth adultery. Let's say it again. Putteth away, by the way, putteth away is divorce, and it doesn't mean that you guys have even walked down the aisle yet. It also means even before, it means even before you're married. Because remember, in our culture, sex is marriage, marriage is sex, but you're pre-qualified for marriage, pre-qualified for sex. He who findeth a wife, right? He who findeth a wife. The husband has to be in a position to be allowed to find a wife in our culture. So he who findeth a wife. So even in Ephesians 5:22, and even in Ephesians 5:25, and even in Ephesians 5:22, Ephesians 5:25, those words they use for wife and husband, they both mean, it can mean you are together after your marriage, or you are still preparing yourselves for marriage one to another, or you are not even betrothed yet. Right? So husband and wife, once again, we got to get into the culture. So let me read Mark chapter 10, verse 11 and 12. We're going to explain this in a second, but I just want to make sure we read these through. Mark chapter 10, verse 11 and 12, right? And he saith unto them, whosoever shall put away. Matter of fact, let's go back. I'm sorry, y'all. Let's just go back. I was trying to get away from this, but let's just go back. Right? Let's start at verse 2. Mark chapter 10, verse 2. Because they were trying to catch him on something. And the Pharisees came to him and asked him, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife? Tempting him. Tempting him. What does that mean? They were trying to tempt him. They were trying to test him. They were trying to see if they can catch him in something. How you doing, Blossom? Right? They were trying to catch him. Tempting him. Is it all right for a man to put away his wife? Trying to see if he was going to be obedient to the law. This is a question. They're trying to question him, and they're doing this on purpose, saying we're ready to catch him in something. Right? Verse 3, and he answered and said unto them, what did Moses command you? He's very careful with his words. He said, what did Moses command you? Verse 4, and they said, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorce. In other words, Moses chose to allow us to go through, right? What is suffering? Suffering is when you choose to go through the pain. So it says what? They said Moses, catch the words, Moses suffered. Moses allowed us to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away. Verse 5, and Yehoshua, right, answered and said unto them, for the hardness of your heart, he wrote you this precept. He put this environment together because of the hardness of your heart. We don't want to admit this, but our people were having an issue with the way we treated our women back then. And so because we would divorce them for any reason whatsoever because we wanted to just sleep around, and we knew that you couldn't just be sleeping with somebody but that wasn't your wife. Now we don't have that concern. We tossed that out. But it used to be, we would say, well, we can't just be sleeping with everybody. So, okay, I guess I'll be with her. And literally stuff like, she not doing the dishes enough. Write a divorce letter and do this. And so Moses saw this. And because we were so hard of heart, Moses, right, he goes ahead and creates an environment to protect women, because the only other way out besides being able to write a divorce bill is, guess what? This is what they were doing to the woman they were about to stone. The only way out of divorce besides divorcement is what? You kill them. So women were starting to get killed. They were starting to come up with stuff and lie on them to kill them off. So Moses says, hey, I got to protect these women. And Yehoshua says, out of the hardness of your heart, he wrote you this precept. He made this environment, not just for you, but also to protect your wives, because you were not being husbands. But then in verse 6, it says, but from the beginning of the creation, Elohim made them male and female. Verse 7, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. Verse 8, and they twain shall be one flesh. The two of them shall be one. So then they are no more twain, two, but one flesh. Verse 9, what therefore Elohim hath joined together, let no man put asunder. That's where that comes from. Therefore, what no man, right, or what Elohim has joined together, no man should put asunder. So you're dealing with what Moses did to try and protect his people, his women, and ultimately protect you from yourselves. But the reality is what Elohim put together supersedes the precept that Moses came up with. That was not Elohim's precept. That was Moses' precept. This is why you got to be careful, because some people worship Moses, the law of Moses, this and that. There's some things that Moses did that weren't correct, or else he would have been in the land of Canaan, right? Moses might have had great intentions. He might have even gone and prayed about it and been allowed to do it, but that wasn't what Yah's precept was. That's not his environment. His environment is what? One wife, right? So, but we're going to get the context. We're going to get the context. So then verse 10, and in the house, his disciples asked him again of the same matter. They wanted a little more information. These are his boys. They roll with them so they can get more information than everybody else. Can you go deeper into that thing you were talking about earlier? This whole divorce thing? Because you making it sound like we can't get divorces out here. That's basically what happens. How you doing, Nia? And so in verse 11, it says, and he saith unto them, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. And if a woman shall put away her husband and be married unto another, she committeth adultery. All right, now let's go to the other scripture real quick, and then let's go through the explanation of this. So we're going to write out three words that we're seeing over and over again. We're going to write out three words, and we're going to discuss what these words mean now that we have proper context. Right, let's look up Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. This is in the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. Come on. Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. And we're going to write out your Sermon on the Mount. Okay? Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26, it says, ye have heard Does that mean that it's correct? Or it just means you heard it? Catch the wording. Ye have heard. Brothers are out here preaching what they have heard, but they need to make sure it's correct. Sisters out here preaching what they have heard. We got to make sure it's correct, okay? So Yahushua says, ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not kill. Right? Oh, hold on. I might have the wrong place. I think I had the wrong one. My bad, y'all. Hold on. I think it's 27 through 32 I'm looking for. My bad. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about another thing. 27 through 32. Excuse me. Sorry. Wrong place. Yeah, 27 through 32. My bad. Let's get that correct. Now Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 26. Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 32. Right? Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 32. All right? Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 through 32. It says, ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. Now here he just says, if you're not careful, it sounds like cognitive dissonance, because you just said, I'm telling you, this is what adultery is, but let's keep going further, right? We just set up that context. We're going to come back to these words, but I just want you to catch it, okay? You have heard it of old time, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, this is, he said, listen to this is more important. He said, but I say unto you, that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. So adultery is not just sleeping with somebody physically, right? The thought of adultery is already the sin of adultery. You thinking it is already messed up. All right. Let's make sure we set proper foundation. Okay. Let's keep on going. So now verse 29. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish and not the whole body should be cast into hell. Now, obviously, he's not saying this for educational purposes only. Obviously, he's not saying do something physically to your eye. What he's saying is ultimately you need to start removing anything that's going to cause you to have adulterous mindset and start chasing these sisters, because if you keep opening yourself up, you're gonna fall for it, right? Out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speak. You keep having something in your heart long enough, it's going to be spoken. But you keep having something in your heart long enough, you might try to say, "Hey, girl, what's up?" Right? You need to do something to make sure that if you need to impair your own spiritual vision, if you need to refocus yourself, recalculate, reshift, rebrand some things, whatever. If you need to dress different, if you need to stop dressing up and dress down, whatever it is, you might need to do some things to ensure that you will not come into a place to where you're going to have your family be in a position, right, to where they're going to be broken up, or right, because if you start thinking on adultery, you're already in a sinful place. You're already going down the wrong path, right? Let's keep on going. Verse 30. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. So now, not only is it going to be something that's leading you to lose your family, but you're going to go to hell over a booty call. You know what I'm saying? You're going to go over to hell over something that once you have it, you don't even want it no more, because you still want to stay with your wife. It's not even about whether you even like you're dealing with your flesh. Your spirit and your soul know that your wife is where it's at, but you're dealing with your flesh, right? Get out of your flesh. You doing an 80-20 or 80-20 thing. You feel like your wife not giving you 20%, you about to lose the 80% of the best thing you've ever had in your life. And instead of helping your wife to become closer to 100, you trying your best to leave 80 so you can get 20, and then try to figure out how to maintain that. But when you do 80-20, they're both human beings. So now you got to start trying to treat them 50-50. You in a weird place. And keep messing around, you're going to end up in hell. Because I'm telling you this, husbands, Yah's looking at how you treat your wife. How you treat your wife, he's looking at that, because that's how he's going to treat you. You're his wife. And if you can't honor your wife on earth, when you get before him, trying to talk about those pearly gates and everything, you come before the throne for judgment, he's going to look at how you dealt with your wife, and he's going to deal with you accordingly. Exactly. You're going to give him something eternal for a temporary situation. So now, Keep on going. Verse 31. It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. So this is basically the same thing we were just talking about, the same situation, Sermon on the Mount. But I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, right? But here's to help it be complete, right? Here's to make it be complete, right? Matthew gives us a little piece that's missing. Matthew says, but I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving, so that means except for, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her, for that is divorced, committeth adultery. Right? So we're dealing with three terms. And we praise y'all for his word. It was blessed before we already turned to it. So we're dealing with three terms. And if we're not careful, we'll mess this up. Right? We have a cultural problem here, a contextual problem, and a problem with our etymology. All right? We got three words that we got to deal with and we got to discuss. We have that honest dialogue about, because these words are different, right, in the culture that is being represented. We have this word that we use here, divorce. Then we're hearing people talk about this word adultery. And then when we read Matthew chapter 5, verse 32, we realized that we were also talking about fornication. Divorce, adultery, fornication. These are the words that we're dealing with. That's the issue we're dealing with. Well, just hang in there with me, right? I see you talking about Romans 7:2. Just hang in there with me, right? So I'm going to lay this out. So divorce is the ultimate thing we're talking about, right? Now, divorce is something that the word says that Moses allowed, right? We talked about that earlier. He allowed this. It's his precepts. But the environment we live in, we're trying to stay away from divorce as much as possible. This is what the Most High says, though, right? This is what Yahushua just told us. He said that if anyone gets a divorce, if any man put away, because if we're getting into the technicalities, we could even say if any man put away his wife. So if you really want to get, like, people really want to get technical, I don't know if you even want to go there with me, because if you really want to get technical, and I'm not talking about cheating, I'm talking about I know there's a brother on here that's ready to go ahead and do this in his mind. So let me just warn you, because if I really wanted to be technical, I can say that technically this is for brothers only, and you put your wife in a position where you mess her up when you divorce her or you put her away. All right, we could go there, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave it open for today, right? So we're talking about this word called divorce. Y'all doesn't believe in divorce. We shouldn't even mess around with it. We shouldn't even throw it away around arbitrarily. People even say, if we're not going to do this, we're not going to get better, if we're not going to be better as a couple, we might as well get a divorce. They just throw the word out. It's like, stop. Like, you playing with some stuff spiritually that you should not be playing with. Like, stop doing that. That's not cool, right? But divorce, right? Divorce, literally to split up, divide, right? To make sure that you two aren't together. Matter of fact, in ancient times, if you were in the military and somebody left the military, right, without telling them where you were going, you just went AWOL, they would call that divorce. And divorce was punishable by death, because divorce is basically you leaving somebody out to dry, and you basically killing off a life. Why? Because two have become one. The two that should have been one now all of a sudden have split again. If I were to cut somebody in half, I would kill them. Therefore, I'm literally killing you. I'm killing what Yah has. I'm killing the relationship. That's what divorce was extremely, extremely, extremely looked down upon, right? But then this word adultery is mentioned. And what we do is in our mind, adultery, once again, means physically, I'm sleeping with somebody else. In our mind, adultery means I have to be cheating. That's what people think adultery is, physical cheating. But Yahushua in Matthew chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. Mark chapter 10, verses 11 and 12 made a point to remind us that adultery is also talking about what? Adultery is talking about even spiritually. Go through, sir. I don't know what's going on. Go through. Come here. Come just walk through. So adultery is dealing. Adultery is sitting here dealing with what? It's dealing with also what's going on with your thought process. A lot of people are committing adultery in their heart and in their mind before they're committing adultery physically, right? And your husband holds us to a higher standard. That's why I tell people all the time, when you hear this term called grace, everybody loves to talk about grace. Grace is a word, especially when people use the Greek context. They're talking about charis or charisma, right? Charisma is who you are. So we talk about the grace of the Most High is who you are. So a lot of people don't comprehend that grace actually, and I also tell people grace. So the grace of Yah, who He is our safety net. So the law is a tightrope. We're supposed to walk on it. But every time we fall, if there's no grace, we fall to our death, right? So until grace is introduced to the equation, right, the law is great, but you can't hold the law. Yahshua died to become the safety net, to allow Himself to be the grace that catches you when you fall off the line. So now that you're on the tightrope, you can do all types of tricks and stuff that you never even tried before, right? But also because grace is there, you're also going to be held to a higher standard. Before, when grace wasn't there, hey, well, I can comprehend why you're not doing this, this, and this on the tightrope because you don't want to fall. If you fall, you die when you hit the ground, right? But now that there's grace, right? The tightrope walker or the trapeze artist or whomever, hey, there's grace there now. So since there's grace, the Most High is there to catch you. I held you to a higher standard. So people don't get this, especially when people try to talk about the law. You do a reverse. People think that the Old Testament is actually harder and the New Testament should make it easier, when the reality is you're held to a higher standard in the New Testament, right? So Yahushua doesn't say, right? He doesn't see adultery in the Old Testament. You just think it physically only. You're just trying to do that and balance and just be really focused on that. He says, look, now I'm looking at you spiritually because I'm covering everything. My blood doesn't just cover your flesh. It covers your soul. It covers your spirit. So now, before, you only thought about physical. But I need you to comprehend you need to be emotionally tuned in too, because some of y'all are emotionally cheating. How you doing, Miss Modesty? You know what I'm saying? Some of you guys are emotionally cheating. Right? He says, I got to hold you accountable. Some of you are spiritually cheating, right? Some of y'all are talking about adultery as if it's only if you sleep with somebody physically. Adultery is if you sleeping with somebody that's outside of your husband, which it always was. But now he's making it more apparent, right? So he says that adultery, right, is something, but if you're not careful, if you divorce your wife, right, and therefore now you marry somebody else, you're committing adultery, right? And he also says, if you leave your husband and now they start it, right, and you start to have sex with somebody else, it's adultery. And he even gets to the point of saying, hey, look, if you divorce your wife and therefore another man marries her, then he's entering into adultery. But here's the thing, that's why we brought up Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 32. I cannot stop there at Matthew 5. Or Mark chapter 10, verse 11 and 12, where we read Mark chapter 10, verses 2 through 12. I have to make sure that I also interject Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 through 32, especially verse 32, where Yahushua says, if you commit fornication, if you try to leave your spouse he says saving for any other reason other than what? For fornication, you commit adultery. And see, once again, we try to oversimplify or we try to undersimplify, possibly, what adultery and fornication mean. Adultery is when you step out of your relationship, whether it be physically or spiritually, you are committing adultery and putting somebody else in the position that your spouse should be in. The only way that is allowed is if somebody commits fornication. We think that fornication means that before I get married, because you think marriage is walking down the aisle. So you guys think that fornication means that I'm sleeping around before I get married, right? I'm sleeping around with multiple partners. Before I get married, I'm cheating on my wife. Before I get married, I'm cheating on my husband. That's what you think fornication means. Fornication does not mean that. Fornication literally means, in the Greek, right? It is a term to help you out. Let me give you the Greek term. It is a Greek term that we would called porneia, right? Or porneia. Some people pronounce it. Some of you will only focus on the first 4 letters of that, right? I'm going to erase that somewhat because I got my son right here. But some of you know that word goes to another word that we use today, right? And if something is porneia or porn, then what does that mean? That means that we're talking about fornication. What is fornication? Fornication is a false image of marriage. Did you catch that? Fornication is a false image of marriage. And Yehoshua says the only way that you don't commit adultery when you get a divorce is if fornication has happened. Fornication is any false image of marriage. So if you were in a false image of marriage, people don't want to hear this, but because we don't want to study these terms. If I'm in a false, people like to say, well, adultery, so that means I can't ever sleep with anybody again, which means I can't be married to anybody again because I can't have sex with anybody again. And sex is marriage and marriage is sex. Look, in our culture, fornication is talking about a false image of marriage. If somebody has you in a false, and I'm not saying, so once again, that's why Moses came up with, allowed people to have divorces, not Yah, but Moses, because we were dealing with people dirty. And so we had to protect our sisters, right? But so I'm not saying somebody didn't take out the trash or you guys argue a lot or you got, no. Hang in there. Make your marriages work. Don't just give up, okay? I got to make that very clear because people try to run what you say and say, see, I was listening to this dude, Kofi, man. Kofi was up here talking about, and we got this false image of marriage and dude, you don't even do this and you don't even do that. I'm done. I'm out. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Right. But what I'm saying is if somebody's giving you a false image, if somebody's abusive, that's a false image of marriage. Right. If somebody's spitting on you, making fun of your parents, if somebody's threatening your life, right? If somebody leaves for days at a time, doesn't tell you where they are, right? If somebody is sleeping around on you, that is fornication. By definition, it is a false image of marriage. It is an idolized marriage, right? Because we shouldn't be worshiping graven images or carved out images or images we've carved out for ourselves, right? It is a false image. So a lot of people talk about adultery and you only think about adultery as, oh, I'm sleeping with somebody else. No, if you divorce somebody, you commit adultery. Especially if there's something you could have worked out, this and that, or whatever. But if you divorce somebody, it's not adultery as long as somebody has committed fornication. And still, it's not grounds to automatically leave. My prayer is always for reconciliation, as is the Most High's prayer, right? However, if somebody's committing fornication and has gotten to a place to where this image of marriage is false, right? Then you go ahead and you get divorced. And therefore, you're not worried about it. So the question I have to ask back, and that you have to answer for yourself, you don't have to answer to me right now in the chat for anybody, but what you got to ask in that question that you ask is not so much, am I allowed to marry again? You have to ask yourself, when you were married, right? Because I'm going to put up quotations marks. I don't know if you were married according to the Most High's will. But if you were doing things according to the Most High's will, and you guys just couldn't get over an argument or something small, or you guys were, there was stuff like, things that you could have gotten past, right? And you got to ask yourself if that's why you got a divorce and maybe see what's going on, right? If you were in a false image of marriage, though, that person was in a false image of marriage as well. And you guys were married on paper, but you weren't married in spirit. You were married in truth. Then we got to ask the question as far as, okay, well, if that's the case, right? If there was abuse going on, if there was cheating going on, if there was mismanagement of funds, if there was talking bad about each other, if there was, you didn't even know what a wife was, he didn't know what a husband was before you got married. Well, if that's what the case is, that's fornication. And fornication means that you have grounds for divorce. It's not the Most High's will necessarily, but he gives you the right because you're the one that's going to have to carry on with this person, not him. And he knows that we're in our flesh. So he gives us the right. That's the only way he gives the right is, okay, hey, if you get a divorce, but fornication has happened, you do what you need to do. But if no fornication has happened and you get a divorce, he has to label that as adultery. Right? Does that make sense? to everybody, right? The differences, because we just assume that this can't happen if you're married, but this happens whether you're single or married, right? So if somebody commits fornication, then you have the right to have a divorce without being called adulterous, right? If somebody doesn't commit fornication and you get that divorce, then it's adultery. Makes sense? Somebody said makes them happy that, that you're single. How you doing, Brother Kenyatta? How you doing, Sister Barbara? So does that make sense? See those words right there? So divorce is something that shouldn't happen if there's no grounds for it, fornication. But if there's fornication, a false image of marriage, then divorce not only can happen, right, but it's not adultery. If you just get, right, because some people do this, man, you know what, we're not getting along. It's been 6 months in. Well, we'll always be friends. And they stop. That's not fornication. That's just you didn't want to work something out, and you didn't even look for tools to help yourself out. Well, you got a divorce on paper, but Yah says that's adultery. So from this point on, everybody you messing with, he don't consider that. Matter of fact, look at it like this. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Look in Matthew chapter 1, and I believe in Luke chapter 3. You'll see that every time that Solomon is mentioned, David's son Solomon, not my son, but David's son Solomon, King David's son, right? David. No, I'm not David. Well, I mean, I'm a David of sorts to you, right? That's not my name though, right? But when you talk about David and then Solomon, right? Whenever Solomon is mentioned in the scripture, right? Solomon is always mentioned as who? Not David's son, but it's talked about that this is born of Uriah's wife. Why? Because even though Yah still blessed it, right? He kept his word. He kept his word to Abraham. He made sure his line of the tribe of Judah was kept intact. But he always reminds you that even though he works out all things together for righteousness, he still makes it a point to tell you, hey, they was into some stuff they shouldn't have been into. When he got killed like that and they was messing around, that was divorce, right? And Uriah did not commit fornication. She did. So I don't forgive that. He says that that's adulterous. So even when he's talking about the Messiah's bloodline, he still tells you, hey, there was some adultery up in that piece. Right? He makes it a point to tell you, like I'm not saying that I don't forgive him, but he just said, if we're gonna keep it a buck with y'all, we can't tell this story without y'all knowing that what he did was wrong. That's how important it is unto the Most High. Right? That's how important it is to the Most High, that you realize that, hey, just don't be trying to split up, and don't be on some stuff, and don't be just trying to get with somebody to the point where you're doing stuff that's not even in your character. Right? He says like he says Moses allowed y'all to get divorced for whatever reason, but that was his precept. Yah's precept says you better have some fornication. That's how strong it is. That's how much it means to him. So that's why I was saying we got to talk about those words differently, because in our mind, once again, even with the words marriage, we don't think of sex as marriage. Marriage is sex, right? But in the Bible, if it doesn't say you walk down the aisle that says so and so knew the other person. That meant that they got intimate. I mean, you can come in there if you want. You just gotta make sure people can see the board. You want to be seen? You want to be seen? It's okay. Come on. Just stand right here. Stand right here. That way, make sure they can see the board. You're fine. So this is what we need to realize and recognize and think about, and be in a position. We're not having a conversation. Be careful about standing on that. Be careful about the leg touching. I think it's a really weak thing. Okay. So we have to be careful. We must recognize what's going on with that. Right? How you doing, Corey? You can be seen. I'm just saying, just make sure your legs aren't touching anything. Yeah, you stand right here. Right? Y'all can still see the board, right? If you're standing right there, yeah, they can still see. Okay. You can poke your head in from time to time. You see I'm walking back and forth. Right? He's in training, y'all. You remember Minister Samaya Lorraine, who had the shofar that you blew? She's saying hello. So we have to recognize these things. So you hear these terms, but we don't think about these terms correct, right? We'll hear about marriage, right? But nobody wants to discuss what marriage really is, right? In our culture, marriage is completely different, right? We can't talk about marriage without talking about two becoming one. We can't, right? So the marriage ceremony, the ceremony that leads up to it, is us celebrating everything, but marriage does not take place until a husband and a wife, right? Marriage is not for a man and a man, right? Marriage is not for a woman and a woman. Man is not for a male and a male, a female and a female, a male and a female, a man and a woman, a man and a wife, right? A husband and a woman. Marriage is between a husband and a wife. In our culture, you have to be qualified already as a husband or a wife. If you are not a husband or a wife already, then you should not be having marriage. That's just the way it is. How you doing, Miss Q? Everybody coming on. Right. So if you're talking about marriage, you got to talk about husband and wife. Right. So hopefully that answered the question. I think we did that pretty thoroughly. Praise God. Consummation, right? Even in modern society today, right? If you get married today and you want to register your marriage with the state, guess what you got to do? You still got to consummate it. If you go back to the state and say we never consummated anything, the state will go ahead and annul your marriage because it doesn't count. How you doing, Everett? Right? So somebody needs to be worthy. Now that's the part we really got to get into, is that some of us are having marriage not being worthy of it yet. And some of us are having marriage and not even trying to see if somebody else is worthy. Hey, husbandmen, those who will plant a seed in the garden called the womb, are you worthy of that womb? And is that garden worthy of your seed? Not trying to talk bad about anybody. These are just questions that we should ask. You say, in our culture, is it biblical that sex equals marriage? Yeah. Once again, when you look at the Bible, you will not find that somebody got married because they had a wedding ceremony. When you look at the Bible, you will not discover that anybody got married because they walked down the aisle. You will not discover that somebody got married because their marriage was registered with the state of Israel. You will find that they got married because two became one, because they knew each other. To know, K-N-O-W, somebody, it literally means to become one with. So in our culture, he who finds a wife, he must already be, in our culture, raised up to be a husband and qualified by the community, where we say he is worthy of being a husband before he finds a wife. And before a wife is found, she must be qualified by the community and agreed upon. As a matter of fact, remember, there's something called a knocking ceremony, where in our culture, right, the son of the father, the father of the hopefully groom to be, if his wife accepts him, has to meet with the father of the bride, and he has to literally go to her house and knock on the door. The father will, with his son in the background, and the father of the bride is on the inside. The wives are present, the mothers are present as well, right? And he comes with a bunch of people who are from the community. So everybody in the community is watching, because they're going to be witnesses. Some would even sign an affidavit, what you would call an affidavit now, right? And they'll watch this to see if everything goes right in the knocking ceremony. And hopefully somebody allows the father of the groom to come in and meet the father of the bride. And the father of the bride hopefully will accept the bridegroom's offer, whether it be him giving him water or tea or some kind of alcoholic beverage or something like that. And if he accepts it, then they begin to talk about terms. The two families will discuss what the family of the groom must pay to the family of the bride, because she is the weaker vessel. The word weaker there actually means she is more precious. We just focus on weak as far as she can't do what a man can do. She is more precious. She's more valuable. He's going to pay a dowry. They're going to come to a situation. How many cows do I need to give? Or how much gold or silver would you like? Or how many years does somebody need to work for you? So she's valuable. And when this is decided upon, then that work is done, and then the son, or the bridegroom, the groom, will then go to his father's house and start to prepare what's called a mansion and add on to what his father has. And the father will watch him build the house and will tell the son when he thinks that the house is worthy of him, so he can go back and get his bride. That's why no man knows the day nor the hour except the father, because the father is the one looking at what he knows as a husband he needs to provide for his own wife, and is thinking about his daughter-in-law, is studying her, is asking questions, is saying, hey, well, you know what? I want a big family. I want a bunch of grandchildren. So you're gonna have to make sure this is big like this. And she's somebody who likes to cook, and she likes to do this. She likes to plant a garden. So you're gonna need to do this. He's giving him all the instructions. So the son has no clue what it is that needs to be done. He's just obeying what the father commands, because they paid for her. She's valuable. This ain't just, I'm paying for you for a day. No. Like they are invested in her. So y'all don't want to see, marriage for us is different. Marriage for us is different. We don't really want to go there because they are invested in her. They still haven't become one yet. They haven't had sex, but all this stuff, they've already adopted her into the family. Right? They've already adopted her into the family. They've got witnesses on this, y'all. Right? Like, it might make them look bad if this doesn't work out. Like, people just get in these relationships, be like, I want to be married to you, and y'all don't think about what you're doing. Like, this might make people look bad. We done did all this stuff to make this happen. And here you are, you're not gonna make sure that you pull through. So his father is on that. While he's doing that and building a mansion, which is an add-on to the house. So a house that his family's gonna live in, right attached to the father's house, so that they might continue to have all the money and everything in the family and they can watch over it. But then while that's happening, the wife is there, right? Or she's at her family's place and she's preparing herself for her husband. She's learning about him. She's hearing about this. She's talking to her parents about what should this happen, that happen. She's asking her father questions about what a husband does. She's asking her mother questions about what a wife does. She's preparing herself. And she's preparing herself even to be separate. There used to be a tradition where we would go to this place called the mountains, or the Wailing Mountains. And she would go there. It was something that actually happened because there was a sister who got sacrificed, and she shouldn't have ever, and she never got a chance to lose her virginity. But after that, the tradition became where sisters who were about to lose their virginity would go to the same mountain and cry out. And so she would actually go out there with her friends. You know, we do this old bachelorette party thing. She would go out there with her friends and they would cry together and wail because she was not going to be the same person that she used to be. But at the same time, they would cry in excitement because she was going to become one with somebody. She was not going to be the same person she used to be. I don't comprehend only 2 minutes with you. 2 minutes for what? To talk? Once again, we got like a language barrier problem. We got to figure it out. Maybe you can DM me. I don't know when I'll be able to check the DMs. Maybe you can DM me and we can figure it out, or we can talk on the phone from there or something. Right? But you got to comprehend, she's in a position where she's getting ready for the bridegroom to come back for her, the bride. And then what happens is she even starts to put oil in her lamp. So she has to make sure her oil is constantly, consistently ready to go. If her oil is not made, if it's not prepared, and she's not checking on it on a regular basis, no man knows the day nor the hour. The son doesn't know the day nor the hour, which means that she doesn't know when he's going to get to come back. They're both waiting on his father to say, go ahead and get your bride, because everything's ready for her. She's preparing herself, waiting for when he's going to come back. So she has to always be ready. Just like we, married to the Most High, need to always be ready. You see that? So when you talk about marriage, sex is marriage, marriage is sex. And then he comes back for the bride. The whole community gets excited. We all come together and party. Everything stops. And then during the ceremony, the bride and the groom would actually leave everybody else, and they would go and they would consummate the marriage. And everybody would actually stop and pause. And I know this might be too much for y'all because we don't, this would be this disgusting to some, right? But it's your culture, believe it or not. Then somebody would, the father of the bride, after they finish, right? And after they come out, everybody waits for the father of the bride to go in the room. He'll go in the room and he'll bring out the sheet. And what's supposed to happen, right? We're outside of this nowadays, but what's supposed to happen is the sheet should have blood and it should have semen on it because their blood has mixed together. The two have become one. His blood, his semen has gone inside her. Her blood, her hymen has gone inside him. And so the two have become one. And so we celebrate it and say, yes, the two have become one. And and watch this divorce word that we talked about, if the son, right, or either one of them, but the son usually is the one that would put her away. If the son ever wanted a divorce, he would have to go back to the father-in-law and have to look his father-in-law in the eye. Because the father-in-law, first thing he's going to do is he's going to take that sheet out that he held and he's going to put it down in front of him. That's the contract. And he's going to say, why is it that this blood that both of you shed, and you're coming back to me asking for me to take my daughter back? When everything that we did was to prepare her for this relationship, you better have something of value. You better tell me why the stuff that we all put into this as a community is about to go away, and why this sheet is going to be something I'm going to have to discard. You better tell me. You better have something worth it. Don't come to me talking about y'all arguing, because the father of the bride ultimately is the one who has the right to be able to say you can or cannot get divorced. So even when we talk about divorce, we just go to the court, or he just want to leave. No. The father of the bride is the one that gets to say, because the father of the bride, this is why when we walk people down the aisle, right? Who giveth this woman away to be married? I do. What's happening there? There's a transition. He cannot be physically her husband, but he's always been spiritually her husband. And he cannot be physically her father, right? Because he's already married to somebody physically, and this is his own blood. It would be disgusting, right? However, right, I'm sorry. So he's physically her father, but he cannot touch her physically because he's not her husband in certain ways, right? So he's spiritually her husband, but he's physically her father. Here comes this new person who cannot be her father physically, but he can be her father spiritually. So he's giving up they're completing her experience. Before that, she's had a physical father who's been her spiritual husband, right? And here comes a spiritual father who will become her physical husband. And the two are transferring power. So who giveth this woman to be given away? We're all standing at that point. Even we're doing the Christian ceremony. That's what I'm talking about now, this Victorian ceremony. People like, who shall give this woman away to be married? And the father says, I do. He's what? Giving her away in marriage. Why? What he's saying is everything that I gave to her as a physical father and a spiritual husband, I expect you to give her everything as a spiritual father and a physical husband. Okay, please remind me via text, if you don't mind. He said, what if the parents didn't agree with the marriage? If the parents didn't agree with the marriage didn't happen. I mean, obedience. And that's why you needed the parents, because the parents were supposed to vet the other person. Now, hopefully the parents are righteous and they're not just doing this just because they're mad or they hold something against you, this and that. But it used to just be if the parents, the parents didn't said no. Like, hopefully it was because the father talked to the other father. By the way, we would have lived with each other, at least been enough community, so we would have had some experience, and the father would have been like, oh, you talk about so-and-so? Like, you're the father of so-and-so? So-and-so to be out there messing with little girls and stuff like that and be breaking their hearts and everything? Oh, no. I don't think he can be with my daughter. Like, they, you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you need, or, if you be talking, he'd be like, wait a second. Hey, babe, do you know who so-and-so is? Oh, okay, he's fine. Oh, he helps you with the market. Oh, that's the guy you were talking about. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, let's talk about this some more. Right? That it's supposed to be one of those where we were all together, or at least talking to each other, or had the same principles and different things like that. Should be able to ask about scripture. Right? Praise God. We're gonna still do it, but one of the wedding ceremonies, we got so many wedding ceremonies this year. Praise God. One of the wedding ceremonies for this year, I was talking to somebody for the first time. Okay. So I was talking to somebody this year, and I was and I was basically saying that or talking to them, whatever, and they were asking questions, and I was kind of looking at the other person. The other person wasn't really trying to look at me as we were having the conversation, because they knew. I was like, I don't know if they should be asking me these questions about the Bible. Like, I don't know if they should be asking me these questions about the Bible. But talk to them, explain some things, and then we realized we were actually kind of sort of on the same page. So, like, I was like, okay, I can see that. But they kind of looked at me, because I'm looking at them like, why are you presenting this person to me for marital coaching and stuff? And they are unaware of what I'm talking about with blah, blah, blah. Like, this is some of the small stuff. Okay, I get it. All right, thank you. I know you're waiting for it, right? Did you do any push-ups, any sit-ups, and anything like that? We just talked about, did you give me my 20 minutes? If you're not going to do that, then you need to just wait and relax, okay? Because now people are starting to hear this stuff because you impatient. Just be patient, all right? All right, thank you. So, and all these things that are going on, right? Like you have to realize those things. And it's almost time to stop anyways, right? So I'm going to be downloading in a second. So I have to press this, and then I have to be able to go. What's going on? Oh, okay. So, sorry, where was I at? I'm sorry, where was I at? Where was I at? I apologize, y'all. Somebody help me out. Where were we at? And thank you for the love. I'm sorry. Great. Where was I at? I'm sorry. Oh yeah. I was finishing up on that. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, yeah, you gotta, you bring this person, you better make sure they know. They gotta know. So yeah, so I'm just saying you gotta be careful. So when we talk about marriage, we're talking about something completely different in the cultural manner. No, he wasn't asking me questions. He wasn't asking me questions. One of the devices that I'm using, or whatever, he wants to use the device. So told him he was going to have to be patient on that. Praise God. And when I said about 20 minutes, he knows that means that he got to give me certain things that he should be doing before he asks for he even ask for what he's asking for. That being said, though, all right, I'm not going to get deep and out my son on stuff. But we don't notice that we don't live in it, right? You said, is hell a fiery place? Someone told you, what would God punish you, or why would he punish you? Hell is the furnace that cremates your soul. So that's an interesting point of view, and people use it a lot, right? I don't want to worship a God that would punish you. Or why? Another question that you get that's very similar to that: why does God have pain? You said, so can he have two wives? Who? Not in our culture. The same Yashua that we just talked about, who said these things, he said that was something that y'all wanted to try and have, whatever. But he said that this purpose was always what? For two people to become one, not three people to have menage a trois, right? But two people to become one, right? So that's the bedroom is undefiled, but you still have to follow the law, right? Like Yah is still in your bedroom. Right. So the bedroom is undefiled. It doesn't mean Yah says, I'll come up to the door and then y'all go in and bring as many people in as you want and y'all keep doing stuff. Right. That's not everything. By the way, even when people try to say, well, Abraham did blah, blah, was that Yah's will? Was that Sarah's will? Or did Abraham just go ahead and go with it? Well, Israel said, well, was that actually Jacob's will? Did he want to have Leah? Did he want to have Leah and Rachel? Did he, right? I'm not saying he didn't bow down to his flesh, but that wasn't Jacob's will even initially, and that wasn't even Yah's will. You see? So you got to be careful. Every time that you see multiple wives show up in your Bible, by the way, you've never seen it work out to where everybody's happy. There's always some kind of contention. Excuse me. All right, so we got to be careful. Some people try to hit you with that. Like, no, that's not our culture. That's not Yah's will. It's not what he asked. None of that. That's what you want, right? But that's just because you might want that. That's not what he asked for, right? Samuel's mother. That might, right? That's not what Yah wants. And Samuel's mother was going through some stuff because of that, right? So I'm just saying, like we pull stuff out trying to, right? David was messing around with multiple women. Was it working out well for him? Didn't Solomon fall because of all the wives that he started to have, even though he was trying to build up an empire? We looked the other way as a people, but didn't we go through some stuff? Like the answer over and over again is like, yeah, that's not what Yah wants. Just because Yah will work some things out doesn't mean that we should put ourselves in hellish situations. But anyway, to go back to the question that I had started to answer, sorry about that. Is hell a fiery place and this and that or whatever? And if God really loves you, why would he punish you? First of all, this goes to a place of, first of all, I don't worship God, I worship Elohim. So I will use that terminology, although I get what the question is, right? And I get that you were asked the question. Elohim is righteous. Elohim sets up laws. What do laws do? Laws don't give rights. Laws protect rights. Right? Laws do not give rights. Laws do what? They protect rights. Correct? Okay. So if I'm dealing with law, right? If I'm dealing with law, law protects rights. This is why death is lawful. Death had no power until sin. We just talked about this earlier today, right? Why was death necessary? Death was there for if sin happened. Why? Because if you stayed in a sinful state forever, you would ultimately be in hell. You would be in a place where you would have this body that could never die, but would always be separated from the Father. And so you wouldn't be able to have access to the Holy Spirit ever. You wouldn't be able, eventually you start losing your healing powers and you become like these vampires that we talked about, where many of them, even in these movies, right? Whether you talk about Underworld, you're talking about, what's the one I mentioned earlier, Interview with the Vampire, or Queen of the Damned, or Blade, or all this stuff. You always deal with these vampires that are supposed to be dealing with a lot of issues because they've been alive for so long and they've been separated from society for so long. They've been separated from righteousness for so long that they're always warped and jacked up with their perceptions of life, right? Like even these vampires that are supposed to be great people or whatever, they always have some really weird stuff. Like even when people who were into, what was the newest, well, it's not the newest one. I don't be watching the stuff y'all be watching. So I don't keep up with stuff anymore. But that one that everybody was crazed over from high school, or not high school, but I was out of high school by then. But what that one where the guy who played Batman, the most recent Batman, he was in it, whatever that was called. Oh, well, Buffy, I forgot about Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't even know if I ever really watched the whole episode. Twilight, thank you. Twilight. Yeah. Even if you watch that, you'll discover that they have a really warped thing. Like, think about it. Even his name is, they call him Jacob in the movie, right? The wolf guy. But the guy, Jacob, is fighting over Bella, right? And Bella and Jacob, the wolf, and the guy, the vampire guy, have this weird relationship thing going on, and then they make it out to be this really cool thing where Bella gives birth to a baby, and then Jacob, the wolf guy, the guy from Shark Boy and all that, he starts digging on her, right? And so he digs on the girl that's born, and they realize and thinks one day that's going to be his wife, and starts to go ahead and protect this little baby that's going to be his wife. Like, you got some really weird stuff that comes out of it, right? But these are people that can't die. And the goal, and really what they're trying to tell you in these movies is, if you can't die, you're going to basically be dealing with some lasciviousness. You're going to be dealing with some really wild, lustful, despicable, decrepit, disgusting things that should die off in you, but they don't have an opportunity to, right? So death is created to ensure that you are separated from sin. And so pain and stuff, now you have to ask yourself, death is something that's there to protect you. Now now the next thing that people don't want to talk about is, well, if you're going to ask me that question, why is suffering allowed? First of all, who allowed death into your life? Was it Yah or was it you? Was it Yah or was it Adam? Right? Like that's the next question. Hey, well, if Yah loves us so much, why would he allow death? Who allowed death? Yah created death to ensure that you wouldn't stay in hell. But who allowed it to be in your life? Right? That's like the whole guns argument, right? Guns kill people. Well, who used the gun? Right? Yeah, there's a thing called death, but you were warned. And by the way, you were warned about how to stay away from it. On the day that you eat of the fruit thereof, you shall surely die. Just don't eat that fruit of every other tree that exists in the garden. Of every other tree that exists in the garden, you may eat, but of the one tree, right? One tree. But guess what? And guess what? The tree, there's interesting language that I didn't even, the Holy Spirit just revealed to me now. I never even caught this before. There's very interesting language that happens there. It says that all of a sudden, right? It says that they found, or Eve found that the tree was attractive to her. But before that, for all this time she was out there, she never thought about the tree. It wasn't until somebody introduced it to her. And then, even though she knew what the law said about it, she still went ahead and found it to be attractive. It wasn't attractive when she thought about it as something that caused death. All of a sudden, when she decided that she wanted to know how much something was, she thought that knowing something that she might not even needed to know, that was more attractive to her than not dying. You got to ask yourself, whose fault is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to ask the question, whose fault is that? Is that Yah's fault, or is that Eve's fault? And it's 11:11. Thank you. So you got to ask yourself, whose fault is that? And this is something that people don't want to talk about. So people say, well, so somebody's got to go burn, or somebody's got to get cancer. So, like, people say, how can somebody have cancer? If Yah loves you, why would he allow pain? Well, Yah says eat real food. If you eat real food, you won't be dealing with cancer. Right? You know what I'm saying? You're literally being sinful. Sin means to miss the mark. If Yah loves us so much, why is there high blood pressure? Because you eat high fructose corn syrup. What does that have to do? You know what I'm saying? Like, what does that have to do with Yah? You hear what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? Like we have this weird perception. We have this weird reality. And by my wife, the way my wife is on, please check out my wife, the Honorable Maya, on TikTok, YouTube, website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish. Not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. We have a weird perception about this. Right? That Yah should be held accountable for our inaction, our actions. You should be held accountable. What Yah says do, then that he should be held accountable. But if you do whatever you want, you can't sit up there and say, I'm gonna do whatever I want. This is my, come here, son. Right? This is my son right here, right? Of whom I am well pleased. Solomon, right? Excellent young man of Yah, or on his way to being young man. He's, how old are you? 7.9
years old.
He's 7.9 years old, right? And I love him dearly, right? Love him dearly. He must be obedient. Hold on, just say a second. He has to be obedient. He has to be obedient. If he is not obedient, guess what? If he's not obedient and something goes wrong, I hold him accountable. If I tell him to take out the trash and to hold it from the bottom to make sure that the trash bag doesn't break, if he picks it up anyways from the top and it falls all over the place, I'm not going to sit there and say, my bad for having you take out the trash. I'm going to say, son, why did you not pick up the trash, put your hand under the bottom, and hold it the way I said so that it wouldn't have a chance to pull apart? However, if I tell him to take out the trash, knowing that no matter what he does, it's going to fall apart, then that's not his fault, that's mine. But the first one is more true, right? If I tell him, hey, when you get angry, these are the things I need you to do to make sure you work out your anger. But he gets angry and punches somebody in the face, you can't come back and say, if the parent comes to me, I'm not going to say, you know what, my fault, I taught him wrong, this and that. I'm going to say, Solomon, why didn't you listen? See, and there might be consequences. You might have to be in your room. You might not be able to get on the game. You might, depending on what happens, you might have to get a spanking, even though he doesn't get those, right? But you might have to get it if it deserves it. right? So he knows those things. So he knows if he does exactly what's asked, then there's a consequence that's righteous. He gets a reward that he really wants. If he does something that's wrong, he knows there's a consequence, and he might get a reward that he doesn't want, or might be awarded, if you don't want to call it rewarded. He might be awarded some things that he doesn't want. So we can't come before our Father in heaven and be like, hey, why am I going through suffering? Why is there this consequence? Because he's got to separate. That's what law does. Law doesn't give rights, law protects rights. And we can't allow you to come into heaven with that foolishness, right? As much as they might think it's acceptable, you can't come into heaven with foolishness. And there's only two outcomes to this, as much as you don't want, because hell is not just only the hellfire part. What people are missing is hell is separation from the Most High. That's why you must die, because if you don't die and get your glorified body, you will be separated from the Most High for eternity. That's an eternal hell within itself. So he created death so that you would not surely live. Remember, as soon as they ate of the tree of knowledge of greatness and evil, they kicked them out of the garden and had a seraphim to guard over it so that they would not eat of the tree of life. If they had ate of the tree of life right after they ate of the tree of knowledge of what you call goodness and evil, then they would have had an issue. Thank you, son. Appreciate it. This way I'm about to give you your thing. Okay? So we have to realize what's going on. We have to recognize it. Right? We had to recognize that this is part of what's going on. And people were just like, well, how can he allow suffering? Watch this. Once again, we got to get into these words. Suffering means you choose to go through it. Suffering means you choose to go through it. And thanks for being part of the community. She's back. Suffering means you have made a choice to go through it. The suffering of the Christ, the passion of the Christ, because of his passion, his heart was for you. He suffered for you. He chose to go through it. That's why it's called suffering. Women's suffrage movement. What did that mean? That meant that women wanted to be able to have the choice that men had to vote, whether you believe you should vote or not, right? But I'm just saying, women wanted to suffer. They wanted to be able to say, we have choice too. That's what the suffrage movement means. So when somebody says, why am I suffering? You got to ask yourself, what are your choices? If Yah loves us so much, why would he allow suffering? Because he allows free will. If he allows free will, he allows suffering. You can choose stuff that comes with a positive consequence. You can choose stuff that comes with a negative consequence. Choose ye this day who you will serve. Right? Like we keep getting options. Look, I love y'all, SOC. I really do. My wife and I have mad love and respect for all y'all. Watch this though. If you choose to go through certain things, there's certain things I will not suffer with you because I can't make certain choices. Not if I'm gonna get certain rewards. My wife is not expected to hang around me no matter what. She didn't have to suffer or choose to go through certain things just because I'm her husband by title. If I act a fool and I'm doing stuff that's causing her life pain and everything, she don't have to be around. Isn't that slavery? That's not suffering, that's slavery. You know what I'm saying? And if you choose to suffer that, you can, but why would you? Like, is that once again using the words correctly? Isn't that fornication? Isn't that a false image of marriage? So when somebody asks me that question, I immediately have to be like, what are you choosing to do? Because nobody wants to talk about the choices. Why does Yah allow children to suffer? Why does he allow children to be born with this ailment and that ailment? Have you ever thought about the fact of were you healthy when you had the child? No. Oh, see, you're victim blaming. No. First of all, the victim is not you, right? You're talking about the child, not you, hopefully, right? Because then that shows me where your heart is. But secondly, that's ableist. No, it's not ableist. That's real. Like your sperm needs to be healthy, and your eggs need to be healthy, right? Your life needs to be healthy, and your ways need to be healthy because your baby is formed from two people becoming one. So if half of you is jacked up, then there's something that could be jacked up. That's real. You see? So, when you have somebody who asks you that question, you just, you have to realize that it's coming from a really, I'll say, interesting place. It's coming from a place where we should probably look at it different. because we don't even think about it. Right? Yah knew you before you were formed in the belly. So, a child being brought into this planet didn't start because of you, or I'm sorry, it didn't start when the baby was in the womb. It started before. If your community is not structured to be able to handle the child, this child's going to have problems, is it not? Right? Is it not? See, we're not thinking of this thing correctly. If you want to talk about how to make sure that we have healthy children brought into the world, don't just think about only the physical. What about the environment? What about the spirit? What about the emotion? Are these not all things that we should be looking at? How you doing, Bevy? And how you doing, Sister Anita? Are these not all things we should look at? Why are we looking at a piece of this? Because we're not holy. We're not whole. We're not correct. We don't care about being righteous. We don't care about being whole or holistic or holy. We just want to win arguments. So you have a lot of people that are just frustrated, or, hey, well, if there really was a Yah, see, I'm going to get you here. That's their mindset. I'm going to get you here. See, because if Yah really was all loving and all knowing and all powerful, then why would he allow somebody to even be able to sin? Well, then he wouldn't create somebody with free will. Do you want free will? Because free will means you have the choice. If you want free will, that also means you get the consequences. He has free will too. That's why he cannot lie. If he were ever to lie, think about this. The same Yah that cannot lie is the one who created the universe, right? Remember the word universe, universe, a single spoken sentence. So the one who created the universe is Yah. That means everything that we live off of is him and what he spoke. If he ever lied about one thing, that means everything must crumble. You catch it? If he lies about one thing, then everything that you know is done. But he has a choice. He could lie. I mean, he could. But he doesn't. Because everything else would crumble. You have a choice. You could lie. You have a choice. You could eat healthy or eat unhealthy. But if everything starts to crumble, why are you blaming him? These are just things, I just questions. I'm a big question person, so I would ask questions back. I'm a big question person. Like, I'm a big question person. I like why, because I like to ask why. So I'm always asking why. So yeah, I get it. If he loves us, why would he allow suffering? Well, you suffer, you choose to go through things. By the way, the suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed. I've chosen to suffer through certain things to get closer to the Most High, but they're not even worthy, as my family and I are starting to live differently and get different experiences and have different things that we've gotten to do or whatever. The things that I've chosen to go through that might be a little painful in one section are not even worthy to be compared to the stuff that happens when he opens up everything unto us. So it's a different mindset. That being said, though, it's time for us to take our leave and do our shout out. We thank you so much for being on today. We appreciate you. Thank you for spending some time with us. We're excited as we continue to grow. I will not be on tomorrow in the Rising. I will be on this evening for Patreon at 7 p.m. Eastern New York time. I'll be on this evening for our live session at about 8 p.m. Eastern New York time. And we'll be on YouTube and TikTok for the rest of that. Thank you to everybody who was on the podcast, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. I apologize we didn't get the second TikTok channel up and running today, but we're thankful and grateful. Thank you for those great questions. So I'm not sure. I think we're going to continue this series on Thursday, but Wednesdays is my day off. So I will not be on the Rising tomorrow. Who will be giving the word will actually be minister now, instead of MIT minister, Samaya Lorray. So we're excited about that. She'll be given an opportunity to be able to speak in front of you all tomorrow on YouTube. So we prayerful over that, and we're excited about that word that she has to give. And we hope that you can join her tomorrow in celebrating her actually she did her initial sermon that was about 15, 20 minutes long. So now she's going to get to come in front of you guys with her, first real deal show enough. Not first one ever, but first one in front of you all. So we're excited about that. And please check out Minister Tamara tomorrow in the evening. I will be on this evening. She'll be on tomorrow evening. And you can be on with her at Tamara_Yah9. That's TAMARA_YAH, the number 9. And we thank you in advance for your support there. Thank you guys so much for supporting SOC in many different ways. Thank you guys for participating in our growth. We ask that you continue to pray for Minister Joseph and Minister Sharon. We ask that you continue to pray for one another. And if you're on TikTok, if you don't mind sticking around for just a hot second, we're going to explain how the shout out works. And that's a way that you can get more information on things we do besides just the live sessions, whether it be class oriented or whether it be meetups, whether it be life coaching, marital coaching, whether it just you want to talk in general, if you want to find out if there's like-minded people that are around you that carry the same beliefs that you do, etc. We'd love to be able to give you that information, and we'll have that on your screen just in a little bit. But we thank everybody again. We appreciate you. We honor the King and Queen in each and every one of you, even if you're not living inside that kingdom or queendom yet. We appreciate the potential King and Queen in each and every one of you. As always, this has been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time, but being the voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. Please check out my wife, as always, the Honorable Maya, on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A and D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. So we're so thankful and grateful for you all, and we appreciate you. We honor you. We honor your presence, and we look forward to talking to you guys very soon. As always, this has been my pleasure. And remember your affirmations as well: Romans 8:1, Romans 8:11, Romans 8:18, Romans 8:19, Romans 8:28. So thank y'all. We appreciate you. We honor you. And you guys take care of yourself. If you're on TikTok, once again, just stick around for a little bit and we'll be able to do our shout out and explain how that works. And you can maybe join us in a little bit of worship as well. But to everybody, we thank you again. And remember, as always, Yashua, that you are loved, you are necessary, you're majestic, you're fearfully and wonderfully made. And you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shalom, family. Peace. Rabbi Shalom. And we'll talk to you guys later this evening. To those that are still with us on TikTok, this is how the shout out works.